Welcome everybody to the Thursday, October 14th meeting of the Affordable Housing Trusts. I'm gonna check to see if we have members online. If you could bring them in, and then I'll do a roll call. If not, we'll just do a standard.
Just Eric.
Yeah, it could be Eric. So.
Yeah, I did send them the panelist link. I'm not seeing any attendees as of right now. Sometimes it loads in a little bit late.
So then we're all set. Call us to order like a normal meeting then. Do we have people online though?
I have no attendees currently.
I think people are. I just had somebody text me that they don't know the meeting ID. That they do need the meeting ID.
Yeah, so it is the link on the agenda.
Should
And
require a meeting. That's
the
what I was
last-
trying- Can you try to log in from the link that was sent? Jack, I was a little bit premature on that, so everybody's going to see us make some sausage here.
We're having a hard time hearing. Will you speak up, or is the meeting not started?
Well, the meeting started. It's just we're checking the Zoom link to make sure people can get in. I imagine with this many people here in the audience, we were going to get some participation online. I want to make sure they can actually get into the meeting.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure that you weren't talking about the meeting and
No.
not hearing.
No. Is that any better?
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Nothing?
No
Were
attendees.
you able to get in?
Let me try one more time.
I've never actually used the meeting ID. I just kind of logged in. But this could be short-lived.
Didn't work for me.
It didn't?
Do you want to read it off to me, or I can read it off to you?
No, I got it right.
You might have to be
Alright.
logged in already.
All right.
So the meeting ID.
I can get in. I just click the link and it goes. But that.
Would you click the link off of the?
The panelist.
No, what I mean, if you had it, if you were looking it up on the agenda, would you be able to like do it? Because that's what people look at.
Yeah, putting in. Did you try just?
So the
putting in-
link on the
Yeah,
agenda,
that's what I
you
tried.
can use the link on the agenda, but the meeting ID is different from, that must have been from the update. It used to be, the end was just the,
I think that's the problem. So now we've got a meeting link on an agenda that doesn't work for people.
Yeah.
Let me see, we did it on
Is that the normal language we usually use?
yes,
Yeah, we
so
can-
again, so the link, if they type that into their.
Jack, go ahead and put us in recess, please. All right. So I'll get as close as I can to the mic. That's better? You have to normally do this that way?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to reiterate what I just said. So we have a Zoom link that's not working. It wasn't sent correctly, or it's changed from a previous version that we've used in the past. Seeing that everybody has come out for this particular meeting, obviously with some things in mind, we're going to go ahead and carry on with our meeting here, seeing that we have all of our membership. But we will have to have another meeting, so everybody who thought they could be here online can participate. So we're going to record this, we're going to broadcast it the best we can, but seeing that people took their actual time to come out of their homes to go do this, we're going to go ahead and have a meeting. So we're going to do the listening session now. It's about 15 minutes, as soon as we could turn the cameras back on. And then we'll go through some of the agenda items that we have. We won't be able to take any action tonight, but we don't really have any action that we were going to do anyways. So I appreciate everybody coming. Jack, go ahead and pull us back out of recess. Thank you very much. So we have, we're going to split this meeting into a couple different meetings. Chris, you had something real quick?
I just wanted to say real quick, I can, for people watching online, by their TV, I can give the ID now, and then they would be able to join using the meeting ID, just in case there are people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
why
took
don't
that
we do
channel.
that?
There's no reason not to. Go ahead and just
So
Give me a high sign if you guys can't hear me through this mic and I'll come back. Still having a problem hearing me? I don't think I can get any.
So the webinar ID for anyone watching on TV is 824-7798-8167.
I won.
Okay.
Did you do that one more time, Chris? 824.
824-7798-8167.
Is there a password?
No, there's no password.
Are we gonna have 20 people out there now tell us that they can't get in, even though what we just sent? Alright, just bear with us for another 2 minutes, let it sink in to everybody, we'll see if we get some participation online, and if we don't, we're gonna have Chris start his listening session.
People are coming in.
The mics just started working too.
Oh, that's brilliant. Good.
Great.
'Cause my back is cooked. I apologize, I'm not trying to be rude, but people are providing feedback from text saying that whether they can or can't get in. Looks like we're making some traction. We're still gonna have to do it again though, but okay. Okay, so we have a scheduled listening session that the planning department of the town was hosting as a separate piece. They weren't able to make the meeting room available on time, so instead of postponing it yet again, we decided to allow them just to come to a trust meeting. We could give them 15 minutes of time to go through it, seeing that the subject material is pertinent to some folks on the trust anyway, seeing we have some new membership here tonight. We have Brittany with us. And we'll go through this and then we'll get to our section of it and we'll have a formal introduction. So some of the information should be helpful if you know nothing about what we're doing or what we're trying to achieve. You get something from it. So Chris, with that, just please take it away.
So thank you. So I prepared this presentation. It's definitely 30,000 feet kind of overview of what the trust has been doing over the course of the last year, the kind of goals and objectives as outlined in the housing production plan, which was approved in 2018. So it may be old hat for some people, maybe refresher for others, but I'm hoping that it's new information for some and will provide some context to the trust's activities. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was understanding affordability, specifically looking at the regulatory perspective and how the state programs define affordability in terms of permitting in those programs. So looking at that, those are based off of the Worcester MA fair market area ratio. And the 2021 income limits for those for qualifications are split in terms of families. So this is what, when people are applying to the programs for affordable housing, this is what this is based on. It looks at the median family income, which in this case for the Worcester metro area is $98,800. And what that does is that breaks down in terms of qualifications the maximum amount of income at 80%. Or 50% or 20% of that median income level. And then there's further analytics to distribute it per number of people in the family. In addition to that, there's regulations that put a cap on fair market rents. There's also a similar calculation for housing, but that's not readily available. It's based off of home sale prices, and I didn't run that calculation for this meeting. But that's typically done at the state level, as the case needs to be. So in this case, for our area, the maximum rent on a 2-bedroom affordable unit is actually $1,491. And again, that splits it in terms of bedroom count. So when we talk about affordability, that's the regulatory process. Looking at guiding documents, two of the documents that are really important for affordable housing in Grafton is obviously the 2018 Housing Production Plan and the Subsidized Housing Inventory. The Subsidized Housing Inventory tracks the affordable housing, and that's where a lot of times people talk about getting to the 10% ratio, which provides for safe harbor. We don't have to read through this. I'll come back to this slide, but those are the two guiding documents. When looking at affordable housing, one of the back of the napkin ratios to look at in terms of identifying affordability gaps that I like to use is the selected monthly owner costs as a percentage of household income. One of the real estate standards is that a housing burden, which is considered 30% or more of income going towards housing costs. That's a ratio that is a kind of a real estate standard. So looking at in Grafton, this is the 2019 American Community Survey 1-year estimates. We don't yet have the 2020 census data processed in this manner, but this is the 1-year estimates that the ACS has provided on the census website. So when we look at that, we see that there is a concern in terms of the 30% and 35% or more housing burden. So that's actually 26% of households in Grafton where they have a mortgage are under a housing burden ratio of their actual mortgage to computed costs. And then for housing units without a mortgage, we have an 18% housing cost burden. So those are a large ratio of Grafton residents. When we move into rental income, there's a similar metric looking at gross rent as a percentage of household income. And again, this population is actually more so at risk in terms of income and housing burden. When we look at that, 45% Grafton renters are under a housing cost burden. So there's a clear need for affordable housing in Grafton. So that's the work that we are conducting. So again, going back to the guiding documents, the Housing Production Plan, approved in 2018, identifies goals and objectives that the town can take in terms of programs and strategies in order to generate affordable housing. Much of those strategies look at achieving production through the 40B program or other programs through the state developing units to achieve 1-year safe haven status, 2-year safe haven status, and then finally, once the 10% is achieved, actually getting a certified housing production plan. So although the housing production plan is approved, the certification, once you hit the 10%, is what actually triggers that safe harbor protection. And there's 3 ways in which to achieve that, but the most typical is through the housing unit minimum. So looking at those housing production plans and goals, the path to safe harbor and certification, these are the goals and strategies that are identified in the housing production plan. I just put up the summary, no need to read through that. I'll cover it a little bit. But it's a 5-year program looking from 2018 when the housing production plan was approved all the way through to 2022. After that time, the town will need to update their housing production plan and seek reapproval to go towards certification. But the 5-year plan really looks at production goals of housing units in terms of achieving that 10%, and then those safe havens 1-year and 2-year outlines. So again, don't try to review it, the most important part for tonight in our listening session is that the goal of the housing production plan is to produce 36 affordable units annually to meet that 1-year safe haven. So that's based off of our SHI units. And then notable that when the 2020 census figures are released, our population is going to go up, obviously, and so it's actually estimated that we'll have to produce 39 units annually, so that's going to go up. And then I blew up that section down there, so actually in the year 5 is the objective that the Affordable Housing Trust has been considering. So this is back in 2018 where the housing production plan contemplates development of town-owned land, specifically 25 Worcester Street or Creeper Hill Road, as a friendly 40B for rental. They're looking at 36 units as the goal. So looking at town-owned property, there's actually very little that is not constrained in terms of conservation land or other parcels. So there's town-owned land. A lot of those parcels, as we'll see, have certain capabilities of being developed, and others do not. This snippet here, town-owned land, is from the annual report of 2020 annual report of the Affordable Housing Trust, which was published in March 2021. So this looks at, from the previous year, 2020, these are all the properties that the Affordable Housing Trust was considering for potential development and reviewing. Since that time, we've gone through a number of exercises to evaluate which of those properties are developable, and all but 25 Worcester Street were found to be not viable. So that's why we are now looking at 25 Worcester Street. For various reasons, there was some protections under Chapter 97 on some of the properties. Others were privately owned and ended up not proceeding. Water and sewer site constraints, as well as property size. So looking at the site, benefits in terms of affordable housing. Things that we have to note, I think, is that it's approximately 1,000 feet from the town common and bus stops. So again, affordable housing in terms of access to transportation opportunities is a very key element in terms of reducing a need for vehicles, number of vehicles to get to work, to get to school, and to get to places of recreation. It's approximately half a mile from Grafton Municipal Center and schools. Again, walkable, bikeable distance. Maybe if you're a 90s kid like I am, maybe not so much nowadays, but that half mile is potentially able to be walked to school. And that's a good distance, again, not needing a car in order to access these services. It's also approximately a little more than a quarter mile from Norcross Park, again, places of recreation. It's on Route 140, approximately 1 mile from Stop and Shop, getting to groceries, and actually 122 is the quickest way to I-90, so traffic would typically flow that way from this property. Also to note, it's actually nearby multiple multifamily sites that are less than a mile away. That's 45 Providence Road, which is approximately 26 units rental. 59 and 63 Providence Road, which is 10 condo units, and 67 Providence Road, which is another 5 units. In looking at this project, the Affordable Housing Trust requested bids from local engineering firms, looking at developing conceptual plans of what can be put. So they looked at a site survey to determine what exactly the limits of the site are, what it can support, and they came up with 4 concept plans, very high level, looking at achieving the affordable housing goals. They looked at the 4 concepts between 20 units and 60 units. Again, I think it's important to remember that the housing production plan identifies an annual minimum goal of 38 to 39 units. I put this up here, so I wanted to mention that these are concept plans. In terms of potential for development, any of these projects, whether it's 20 units, whether it's 4 units, whether it's 60 units, is going to trigger special permit and site plan review. I didn't list all of the criteria that the boards look at because it is extensive. But the sections of the zoning bylaw that are controlling in this case are section 1333, section 1555, section 41, which is additional performance standards, and section 522, which is specifically to multifamily criteria and design guidelines. Again, this looks at a number of extensive things, including stormwater, traffic circulation, landscaping, buffering, lighting, topography, grading, parking, service areas, trash disposal, signage, and my favorite, down here, any other information deemed necessary by the planning board. So again, it's very extensive in what information the board can request, but they do have criteria that they specifically base their and render their decision on. So any of this would go through the appropriate local approvals before being constructed. And again, those would be public hearings soliciting additional public input. So with that, it's very high level. I just wanted to kind of touch on that, and I'm happy to take any questions or discussion.
So for this particular part of the question and answer, just let's try to focus on just the presentation that was made. We'll move into some of our other topics in a few moments after we get through this piece. Does anybody can everybody hear me? Brilliant. Does anybody have any questions for our town planner? The procedure typically we'll use is you come up and use either the podium, or if you're more comfortable sitting and chatting, the desk right here would work as well. Just state your name and who you are. If you are not comfortable in this session, we have an email. If you have a phone, you can email it to us and we can go through it. Or you can just log right on to your actual phone and click into the Zoom link meeting and use the chat feature down at the bottom in case you're uncomfortable in crowds and this type of thing. We'll give it a couple minutes.
Joanne Padgett, 23 North Street. Mr.
McGoldrick?
Sorry, I can't pronounce that.
Yep.
Thank you for the time and effort you spent on that presentation. I am just a little bit confused because I'm not sure that you're aware there's a warrant article to have the 55 and older affordable, which this is all staged around, taken off of the deed. So how are we still discussing this?
So I'm aware of the warrant article that you're discussing. I believe that that was the item that would be discussed at a later time in this meeting. I was asked to provide a kind of high-level presentation in terms of the goals of the 2018
To see
housing
what we are
production
not
plan.
going to do?
Sorry?
To see what we are not going to do? What is the point of having a presentation on something that they are going to remove that 55 and older?
So let me preface this by saying that we are asking the town to remove it. Those are clearly separate things. If the town were to remain the same and not allow us to pull the restriction off, then this is what we'd be dealing with. This is kind of a courtesy that we kind of gave the planning board, who was commissioned to handle this hearing. So the presentation was designed around what's existing. So take what information you can from the information that's provided to make yourself comfortable with the topics that we're going over. But we are going to talk in a few minutes about the 25 Worcester Street warrant article.
Okay.
So if you want to save it for that, that'd be
So
fine.
thank you, so that we understand that if we get to town meeting and we vote down Article 25, this is what we can expect at this site on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust.
Correct, yeah. So this is just to give a summary of the 2018 Housing Production Plan, the projects that the Affordable Housing Trust has been considering on the site, and provide some information to the public to make informed decisions in the future.
Would this be the time to raise the fact that there are other affordable housing projects in the works in Grafton with several hundreds of units coming on stream, or do we not count them until they're in the ground and built?
So until they've received occupancy, they can't be added to the subsidized housing inventory. So even though they're under construction and they're having the marketing plans, it's actually the occupancy permits that trigger or allow staff to compile the application for the state to be placed on the subsidized housing inventory.
So just so that I'm clear, so when we get the 400 plus units in the works right now, would that mean that your goal of 40 units per year is taken care of for the next 10 years?
It may be enough to be certified, but again, we'll have to see how that, depending upon, I hope that the project is completed tomorrow, but we can't necessarily bank on that. In the
Okay.
meantime, there's still the possibility for an unfriendly 40B.
And am I correct in stating that when these rental units, which is what they're saying they're going to be doing, come on, you count all of them, not just what's affordable?
Yeah, so from the project application, they are rental units. They have set aside 25%. The regulatory body, when we submit those new units, if it's at 25%, we are allowed to count all of the units, including the market rate, on the subsidized housing inventory.
And what, in your experience, have people gone to the stage of clearing the land, purchasing the land, submitting the plans, going through the vetting process, and then not having the project be completed?
I'm not aware of any
Okay,
circumstance.
so Pine Street and Prentice Street, as far as we can go from our experience here in Grafton, are pretty much going to bring us at least 350 units to our inventory.
Correct.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Joanne.
Hey, Chris, could you get out a screen share?
Wait. There were a few points that I think you missed. The 17 and 27 Upton Street is not 25% affordable, so those will not all count towards.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're-
So thank you for that
We'll
clarification.
provide plenty of
So-
opportunity to talk.
So the
gonna talk
17 and
now.
27 Upton is currently at 10%, so only the 10% of the units, which I believe is 8, would be counted on the SHI. There is some potential we've been negotiating with the developer to potentially increase that amount, but that's another agenda.
Joanne, it might be beneficial if we move from this into
I
the
just want to
actual
say
talk.
something. I did not mention Upton Street. I said Pine Street and Prentice. Thank you.
That's fine. Does anybody else have any questions for Chris? Please, Ron.
Ron Warwick, 32 Worcester Street. So what you presented just now, is that I didn't see or hear the words 40B. Did I miss it?
So it was in there. So the 40B process, that's MGL 40B. That's the process that most developers, will develop affordable housing units. What that does is it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It actually limits the local control that they have over the project in terms of zoning, and it's a state process in terms of developing affordable units where they otherwise would not be able to be residential units.
But that was not this.
It's related. So the 40B process, again, that's kind of separate. What we were presenting in this project or this presentation was the 2018 Housing Production Plan Goals and Objectives in 25 Worcester Street. There's a number of methods that if the Affordable Housing Trust was moving forward with units on this site, they could do potentially a 40B, or there's other methods depending upon the regulatory context.
So would we anticipate the 25-75% split?
Well, that's not something that's part of this presentation. That's a trust decision on what we want to do with the property. So what we roll out as far as a development opportunity, how we choose to develop it, and what programs that are out there for us to solicit is something that we would discuss as a trust as we move from a concept phase to
Right.
making a decision on what we're going to do.
I think what he's asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if we make apartments, rental units out of it, are all of those units going to count towards the subsidized housing inventory?
Almost certainly.
If that's what you're asking, yes.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that we would, as part of this process, and, I'm going to lead from you to kind of the trust's position on this particular thing is, I know you've been through a couple of these meetings, but certainly some people in the audience have not. The trust is an autonomous unit that kind of runs. We get appointed by the select board, but the trust operates, to be fair to it, like its own municipality. Yet we still go through all the normal channels that any other land developer would have to. We don't have and are not equipped to develop these programs ourselves. So what we would do is we would take the property which we own, and we would decide amongst us what we want to do and what we want to see there. And then we would send it out to some type of bidding process in which we could find developers to partner with us, should that be the way we're going, like a 20 units, 40 units, or something like that. Once we've initiated that and we've gotten somebody who is willing to partner with us, we bring certain things to the table, of course, the land and some money that the trust has for these purposes. We would have to, by the way we're designed, make sure that those are counting towards our mission, which is producing affordable housing units. So we would restrict the developer to a certain set of rules, and we can also restrict them to a certain set of design standards that are in RFP. Now, in this process, we need to make sure that we're producing something that we can actually get somebody to develop and build, should we go that route and not be able to do it completely out of pocket, which we're not going to be able to do. There's just not enough money in there to do that. So that's kind of part of the process. Once we have all that done and we've made a decision and we've created a partnership, we would come back and go through the normal channels that should the 40B be the option we go with, a LIP, we would go to the select board, we would ask them for their endorsement of it, and then we would start with the normal zoning affairs, and then you would get a public hearing process, you would go through much of the stuff that Chris was talking about. Other participations we may see, and something we're going to talk about next, is the GSX not subdivision, but apartment complex that's being proposed up on Upton Street, which is important because the numbers, which I think Joanne was alluding to, with the numbers that we feel that we can get out of that particular complex, along with Pine Streets and Sotier's development on Prentice Place, which should put us in a comfortable spot to make that 10%. Which would change what we want to do on 25 Worcester Street, I'm sure, in a material sense. But we're taking the opportunity now to see what else we can do with the property, because as we've gone through this process, we found some limitations on the site and what we can do. So we'll go through those a little bit too. I would recommend, if you're highly interested in this, if you take some of our old meetings, which you can get online, and review some of the tape that's there. We're gonna get questions because it's nice to have people actually show up to these things. So we'll make sure we give you the opportunity to participate this evening. But you know, you're gonna want to get some more in-depth stuff, and we're not gonna spend 2 hours here regurgitating what we've already done. So just, you know, to bundle it up, the trust operates in a public session. So we hold public meetings and we go through a normal discourse. When we get to the point where we're making decisions, we will hold a public hearing. We don't have to, but we will go through that process. And then it goes on to its normal channels. And then the public gets the public hearing process at all the other steps, whether it's on the select board when we go through to get endorsement, or in the ZBA process. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved, so to speak.
Well, you answered a lot more than I asked.
Yeah, I know, but we're going to get there anyway.
Where I was
so.
going with this was, I know I was, I was before you several months ago, where I raised the point that the words in the deed, senior affordable housing, were restrictions in the deed. I have since done, and I said that I didn't believe that you could build anything but senior affordable housing on that property because of a restriction in the deed. I have since done research, and I found many instances where the state appeals courts have made decisions stating that 40B does not override deeds throughout the entire state. So I still make the claim that you can't do anything there but senior affordable housing. So if it doesn't come off, you still have a major problem with that property, and what you're suggesting, I believe, cannot be done.
Okay.
Just letting you know. I told you that months ago. As I've said, I found evidence that the states tell you.
Well, there might be some confusion in what we were talking about at the time to what it is now. We are aware that the restriction that on it does limit our ability to develop it in different ways.
What do you mean by limits? What do you mean by limits? I say you can't do anything but that. What do you say the limits are?
But you're not specifying but what? What are you talking about? We're talking about 55 plus housing there.
Or affordable housing. The only thing you could put there is affordable housing.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll save that argument for another time,
Okay.
which of course we'll get to. We'll take your comments to heed and we'll send it to our council.
I'll send you some of the rulings.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
I'll forward them along for you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions for Chris? And then we're going to move on to some quick updates, and then we'll start opening it up.
I'm actually really confused right now. So
Sure.
I thought we couldn't count the units toward the subsidized housing inventory if they're age restricted. And like I thought we talked about it at our previous meetings, and I'm not sure how we could do a 40B if, for example, an unfriendly 40B came in and said they wanted to do age restricted housing as a 40B. Would that be allowed?
You can do it, it just wouldn't count towards the subsidized housing inventory.
That's correct.
But then a 40B, an unfriendly 40B is coming into town, doing that development here and not adding to our subsidized housing inventory.
That would be correct. In one interpretation of DHP's rules. I would argue, and we'll get to this in the 25
Yeah.
Worcester Street thing. We'll get to that when we get to the 25 Worcester Street.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only time where we can actually sit as a trust as in a public body. So we have to hold a meeting and we discuss these things. So we discuss these things so everybody on the trust knows what they do. So when we get to the point where we make a vote, make some of the critical decisions, we all have the information in hand. We're not allowed to do this offline. So, you know, questions get brought up and you see them going back and forth here. This is this normal nature of a trust. There's lots of trusts out there that handle themselves in the same fashion, some not in such a very public format. So as we're having a dialogue amongst ourselves, it's important that we convey the information as best we can between us. So if questions come up, if deed restriction questions come up and things of that nature, that we get to the bottom of it. We're not all professional developers on this board. We're just hired by the town to do this role, but our mission is fairly clear.
We
So,
volunteer to do this role. We're not hired to do anything.
well, fair enough. We don't get paid to do this. Do you have a question for Chris, or?
I think I know.
All right, let's see.
Tim Carr, 18 Worcester Street. So regardless of what happens with the property, whether it's senior affordable housing, what happens to the property after it's developed? Is it still in the possession of the trust, or is it resold through GSX or the developer?
All right, so just
And I don't know if that's a question.
GSX doesn't actually have a bid on 25 Worcester Street. It's a separate project. They're intertwined because it's a matter of what we put our materials into as far as like a project to move forward with, from a capital standpoint and just a time standpoint. 25 Worcester Street could go 100 different ways, depending on what we decided. What would probably happen is the land would be packaged up because it has some residual value with the property in place to go to the developer as part of our grant, so to speak. So the developer would own the land. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to go that way. There could be other things that could be done there as well.
And then, as far as funding for the remaining portion of the project, is that funded through the developer, or is that
It can be.
through taxpayers and
No,
town?
so that the taxpayers, it's not a subsidized project, not like you would consider like Zagonis or Snow, which is some of our housing authority property. This is kind of standalone. You would partner with the developer to do it. It'd be like a standard.
So they would be
40B.
bringing in investors and
They would be doing their own thing, yes. They would bid on this. We would bring some money, some material, some capital, some things to the table, or we may not have to. We may just require us bringing the land. There's a myriad of things that are, about 3 or 4 miles down the road from once we decide on what we want to do concept-wise that we would see. And some of those things that we put together may not work and may not be viable with the price of lumber. If you're catching $2.15 a square foot, which they're looking at up on Upton Street, it makes it very difficult to do a project, and you have to do more units to make your margins to entice the developer to get in there and do it. So those are all things that we kind of have to go through. So it changes the nature of the particular development.
okay. Thank you.
But again, that you can go ahead and step down and we'll talk directly to you. That actually goes back to the ZBA process and the process by which all developers would go through. Joanne, do you have another question for
Yeah,
this?
I
I'm gonna move
do.
on to GSX.
I just have a really quick question because this is what my big struggle is.
Sure.
We gifted the town residents who have lived here for many, many years. Some have just moved in. All of us that went to that meeting gifted for $0 that land to the Affordable Housing Trust for a 55 and older affordable housing development. So how can you be discussing giving it away, doing different things with it, if it's not going to be built in affordable housing and 55 and older, and you have any moral compass, you should give it back to the town.
I'm gonna hold you up there. We'll get to this question a little bit later.
Well, that's what we're here for. That's why we're here.
If actually,
Let's stop the double talk and get.
hey guys, if we can't conduct this meeting orderly, we're not gonna have it.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason. Let us get through the meeting. Now, we're all done with this for now. So we're gonna move on to some of our other topics,
Actually, no, Bruce, could I address that last point?
if you like.
The moral compass here was to develop as much affordable housing for seniors as we possibly could at the time. That's why the land was gifted to the trust, for the purpose. Stop, again,
He's gonna have
again.
the opportunity to talk. I told you you would have the opportunity to talk later. You're not gonna talk at me in masses. We have business to conduct here. This is a public session. We're offering a courtesy for people to public comment. You are
Now I know
very,
how
very
school
welcome.
committees
There's
feel.
no
How-
need, there's absolutely no need for snide comments. We're getting through this. I already told you we're getting through this. You may not like the information that we're presenting to you tonight, but this is the only way we're gonna convey it. Our job here is very different from your job over there. So if you tell us at a certain point, that's fine. We'll take it into consideration. But you're not gonna sit there and yell at us all night. That's not what these folks are here for. Okay? We're doing a job. We're doing a service. If you don't like it, you can participate in other manners, okay? But for right now, we're going through what we're gonna go through, and then we're gonna give you the opportunity to give us questions, comments, concerns. But you're gonna do it in an orderly fashion, okay? Or you're just gonna wait till we get to the point where you're allowed to have it by right, and we'll let you go from there, okay? So hold the comments, hold the snide remarks, hold the moral compass stuff, keep it all to yourself. We'll get through our things, and then we'll solicit some more information from you folks, okay? If not, we'll just shut the meeting down now and we'll do it in another session. So, all right, so moving on, GSX updates. So GSX is a project, not only the Pine Street project, which is separate from the Upton Street, but they're the same company. So the trust has reached out. They have a development that's going through just a regular special permit process with the planning board. In this process, they're required to have 10% affordable units in the project. So it's a fairly large apartment complex that they're proposing that goes through the planning board. It has some preliminary hearings already, or at least some talk back and forth. They currently have a P&S with the town that's being negotiated now. As part of that agreement, we have reached out to GSX to try to negotiate a way for them to get to the 25% mark. The reason why that's important is something that was mentioned in the presentation is they are all apartments, so if we do get to the 25% threshold, then all the units there will count. It will be a significant boon for our SHI in town and what we can do with 40B projects further down the road, as was mentioned in the presentation. So a subcommittee, we met with the principal at GSX, and this is pertinent for you, Brittany, because you weren't here at that meeting,
Yeah.
to discuss a grant program and what type of funding we need and what type of requirements we were going to have. So we had the preliminary discussion. We're kind of hamstrung now, waiting for the town to finish negotiating its end of the P&S. So as I was mentioning before, we kind of operate as a municipality on the side. We don't enter into agreements on behalf of the town or with the town, and they don't do that as well. So we're kind of going through that process as we're waiting for the P&S to be developed and signed off of on the town. That would give us the permission to, in earnest, enter into negotiations with GSX for what they're going to want. It looks like right now it's somewhere between $850 and $950 in some type of grant program. That would cover a lot of the soft costs and upfront costs. They have agreed to provide us a collateralized position in the land, which has significantly more value than the purchase price once the permitting is in place. So I think we expressed that we weren't willing to go beyond what we could collateralize. So we're working from there, and they seem to acquiesce to that as well. There's other things that they would like to have us participate in. One is the TIF program. So if you're not familiar with the TIF, TIFs are basically tax incentives for different operating companies that come into town. So this would be the first one that would be provided to a residential development opportunity. There's a TIF committee in town which is has membership from a couple of different bodies, the EDC, the Select Board. They would initiate the process. We've seen a couple. UPS was done just a couple years ago, where it goes through the system, and then ends up going to town meeting, and town meeting decides on whether or not they want to grant the TIF. And they can range from anywhere from 3 years to 15 years. They kind of can go all over the place. But that would be further incentive on the operational side, because there's two, and you probably know this, but I'm speaking for everybody too, but I'm just directing at you because you're new here.
Sorry, I don't know any of your names yet. So.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll back up and get to that. Let me stop my chain of thought, or keep going on my train of thought. So, basically, I lost it.
That's okay.
So,
I think that's I get.
all right. So, anyways, we have a new member here tonight. Brittany, she just got signed on. We do have one other available spot from another resignation that was posted. So, in a couple of weeks, I assume the select board will pick that up. They're the governing body for us. So, if we could just go quickly.
Sure. Matthew Often, I'm the select board rep. I joined the trust a couple months ago.
I'm Stan Cush, I'm the clerk.
Bruce Spinney on the chair.
I'm Ed Prisby. I'm a lawyer. I've been doing affordable housing trust issues for the past 15 years of my life. I've done this is my third stint now on this board. These are difficult issues, and what you're seeing here tonight has been basically par for the course of what you get with these developments.
So your background is attorney.
Yes.
What's your background?
Development.
Okay, and engineer. Software engineer.
So I'm Chris McGoldrick. I'm the town planner, so staff with the town.
Great. Thank
The
you.
one individual we're missing is Eric Swenson.
Okay.
Who's an at-large member.
Okay.
He wasn't able to come tonight. We're a 7-member body. So.
Okay.
All right, back to my train of thought. Can somebody cue me up?
No, I didn't.
All right, great.
So Bruce, you reference a TIF.
Thank you. Okay, so
I'm not sure necessarily everybody knows what a TIF is. So
all right, so I was going through the TIP process. I know a lot of people you know, but somebody might review this tape. And like I mentioned before, I'm not trying to patronize individuals here who already are well versed in the town and how it works. This is for people who are not. So the TIP process is basically it's a tax deferment or basically a tax relief for a certain period of time, which can be applied for and can be granted by the town meeting body, which is the October town meeting or any town meeting in general. That would provide them with some operational incentive because it's apartment complexes, so their market rate and then their affordable rate are significantly different. This would help them offset that side. Okay. The grant money would offset some of the construction side. So it's a large project, and I'm sure you're aware as well. So soft costs are typically your most expensive costs for a particular piece. We can provide some subsidy there and encourage them to get to the 25%. Now, they don't have to get to the 25%. 10% does work for them. But for us to get 39 units for the amount of money and time that we could put in for that particular project would, well, seeing that the trust hasn't produced any units in its history, would be a particular windfall, and it would be good for the town as well. And people wanting to come and live in our community. So I was asked by the town administrator if the trust would kind of pick up that mantle. Now, we don't have any authority to put a TIF on the actual warrant, but we can provide the necessary information and the go-between between GSX and the town. So we can, seeing that we have skin in the game, we can provide what most developers wouldn't have the opportunity to have. Which is kind of direct access to the trust, the meeting schedule, boots on the ground, so to speak. The other thing that we were asked to do is, to participate in some of the meetings that were going to come up. So the planning board will have a fairly significant public hearing process for their special permit, which will solicit for public comment and things of that nature, like we've said a couple times a year. Having participation is something that trust in the past has not typically done, beyond the lip and showing up at the select board with a recommendation or a recommendation for rights of first refusal on chapter land that's coming out. So they would be asking us to play a much bigger role, which is something that I've been talking about for the past 6 months, is, you know, the dedication for what the trust needs to do to help some of these projects move forward, is gonna be, time consuming, and it's also gonna require, sitting in a heated room for some of these things.
Yep, understood.
It may be that or maybe not. It depends on how things,
So-
you know, go, but typically, the trust has kind of been standoff in a lot of this, but seeing that we're actually gonna participate in a very major way, we need to make sure that we're ready and we have the organizational skills in place to let everybody know when and where to be, to make sure they get to town meeting and things of that nature. So it'd be very different than what we've done in the past.
Okay.
We're kind of stuck on the PNS until the town works it out. Now, I know they were working last week to finish some of the back and forth. There were some concerns with the timeline. The project is, you know, probably going to go through a permitting and investment model. If they use HUD, you know, 18 months to 2 years is what they would be projecting. So
Do you have like bullet points you're reading off that you could send?
for
Feels like you're just talking the same things.
it could be, yeah, we can go back
Okay.
through.
Yeah, I'm just getting a little lost.
Okay. I imagine if she's getting lost, everybody else is getting a little lost, which is something I tend to ramble on. So I will open up the GSX thing to comments and questions and concerns from the board that you want me to bring back to the subcommittee, or any thoughts you have, and then I'll take some questions from the public on the GSX project itself, which is the Upton Street project, not the Pine Street project.
Okay, that helps.
And again, offline, of course, you send them to the planning office. They'll trickle down to us if you don't feel comfortable commenting here. And I know I ramble and it's a lot to digest.
That's okay.
So if you
I work
get
with developers all day.
yeah, so I appreciate the patience, but just send them along.
Yep,
And then
I
you know
will.
I do send out something for the agenda every time we have post an agenda,
Mm-hmm.
which gives the trust opportunities to put stuff on here in much greater detail on what they want to vet out.
Okay.
And if we need to bring consultants in, we do have them at our disposal, which is part of the reason why we have the 7:45 time frame, and we're still holding hybrid meetings.
Gotcha.
So we do have our own council, and we do have our own consultants that are apart from the town,
Okay.
that lend us their advice. Anybody on the trust have anything?
So, is there any update from the subcommittee?
Just that, you know, somewhere like in like that 30 minutes I've been talking,
The
there was like a
PNS.
5-minute snippet. We're waiting on the PNS, but we expressed our desire to have the grants collateralized. So any money we get there, if they
I see.
decided to bail,
Got
they
it.
would go. But they're not willing to put anything to paper. They're not willing to paper the deal until they actually have a PNS signed.
Sure, that makes sense.
Got it.
The collateralization, I don't know if that's a word. That's great news.
But it's somewhere between 850 and 950, which I think is a comfortable number for our reserves and what we're gonna get accomplished there. Anything more, you're gonna go past what the land is gonna be worth, and I don't feel comfortable with that with position. Of course, it's up to the trust to make that decision, if they want to, so the
Gotcha.
option's there. So we'll provide some more information as soon as the PNS gets signed and they firm up their investment model and who they're looking to get financing from, because that will make a couple determinations, and also set the time frame. Anything else on GSX?
No.
Chris, anything?
So just one last question.
Sure.
What would be the approach to the TIF committee? How would that work?
So, once they get a PNS in place, they would basically have to come up with a presentation for the TIF committee on what they're actually getting and then the reasons for wanting to get to that point.
Okay.
So that we do have a pro forma that we sent around, which kind of has a unit by unit breakdown of what they're looking to get per unit and what makes it work for them. So when they marry that to offset some of their investment model costs, they'll be able to come up with a number. My guess is it's going to be a 15-year TIF that's incremental, that's going to be heavy up front while they're getting their occupancy, and then backs off over the time.
Okay.
Now, the inner workings of a TIF and how massaged, so to speak, it can be, like, at 7 years, if they're a certain benchmark, it goes to a certain level. I don't know how complicated that can be in that program. I'm pretty sure it has to be kind of straight out, and it's just a percentage or a number every single year, without contingencies built in.
Okay.
So, but the TIF committee, that's what it's there for. To
And
decide.
I think what I heard you say was the trust would have no part in negotiating or sort of working through that with them. It's more just a facilitation role.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're not. It's really not our. It's the select board.
So the TIF is the town. Yep,
Yeah.
Got it.
And then eventually we'll go to a town meeting. Now, they are going to look for a town meeting, a special town meeting, should they get some resolution on the PNS of doing something probably in December. So it could be that soon. I think that's going to be unrealistic as far as what the time frame. But that was something that was discussed. And of course, again, that's up to you guys if you want to do it.
Sure.
I would say that probably the earliest that they're going to be at any conclusion point for signing the PNS is probably over the next month. So if you go from that to TIF committees and actually getting them together, getting an actual meeting on the books, a public meeting on the books, and going through that whole process, you're probably deep into December before you can get everything lined up, which means your meeting is going to be January, if not February.
Okay.
So, and then of course it's up to you guys if you want to wait till the spring. I would say you probably wouldn't, but who knows? So there is some expense involved in having a special town meeting.
Okay.
So, GSX question specific to my diatribe. Does anybody have anything? Okay, perfect. Now, apparently off to 25 Worcester Street, which I assume we'll get some more feedback. So 25 Worcester Street, as everybody on the trust knows and agreed upon, we are going to ask the town to remove the deed restriction that is currently in place. And the thought process, of course, is to provide greater flexibility on what we can do for affordable projects.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes.
Because you said the thought process, of course. I think there are going to be people in the room that are going to want to know why, after just having said what we said about the need for senior housing in Grafton, why we would potentially shift gears.
Okay. So when we discussed removing the restriction or going back or requesting to go back to the town to remove the restriction, when we went through the concept process, we got some advice from council back and forth on what we could do inside that restriction, which is basically a warrant article attached to the deed. We did find out that, yes, that is a deed restriction. There's no real way that the 40B process or any process that we could undertake would be able to alleviate that restriction. As we proposed the different concepts and we were getting a little bit more granular in what we were trying to get accomplished there, we noticed that it would be very hard to pair what we were trying to do with the restrictions that were on there. And the one caveat, of course, to that is the information that we received back from our council was that our community wouldn't be able to demonstrate a greater need for a 55-plus community versus any other particular demographic in town. Now, this is just a straight comparison on who would apply or who is eligible for 40B. So that was the dilemma what we had. So if we were looking at the concepts, and the 60-unit concept would work for a 55-plus because there's enough density there. As we were probing a little bit deeper, we felt that that was going to be too many units for there, and we wanted some more flexibility on what we could design. Now, remember, we only have about 1 million. Joanne, we'll get to it. You can put your hand down. You'll be able to come up as soon as I'm finished. With those restrictions on there and what we would propose to a developer that would have to come in and partner with us because we don't have enough money or capital to do this all on our own. There are other things we can do there, of course, and we'd be willing to look at it, but we decided that if we had other things, incentive for us to go and try to deploy 40B projects or partner with other developers and get greater bang for the buck for the capital that we had, we wanted to be able to have a little bit more flexibility on what we could propose there. Of course, that, like I mentioned before, it doesn't alleviate any of the need to go to ZBA, the need to go through the regular process.
Can you
But
be more specific about what you mean by flexibility there?
Flexibility as far as design and what we can get accomplished, so.
Physical design?
Physical design.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Size, scope, density, all of it.
So the game we're playing, and I'm saying game, and I know this is a very serious topic, but let me get my thoughts across.
Please don't say
anyways.
game again.
All right.
Please don't do that.
So what we're trying to do is to develop as much density there that is reasonable and appropriate across a broader spectrum, so we get to service, I guess, as many people who want to move into the community, because that's kind of our charge to do it. Now, it may mean that we can't get that accomplished, but our charge is to provide affordable housing in town. And the land was definitely gifted to us, but what we're asking for is essentially a relief from the citizens petition that proposed the particular article. I'm probably talking in circles because I've been talking too long, so I'm going to open it up to the rest of the trust and just to kind of maybe put a finer point on what I'm trying to get across. Or
Sure. Let me put it in simpler terms, I think. In order to do what we originally wanted to do, it would cost us more because it's not as profitable to be able to build a senior living for whatever developer is going to come in and eke out a marginal profit. And I'll get back to the developer thing because I know it's a bone of contention for people. So you would have to build something bigger, okay? The other problem is, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts recognizes that providing housing for families is as pressing a need as providing housing for seniors, they're disincentivizing housing trusts like us to go out and provide housing for seniors by saying, well, unless you can demonstrate that it's really, really in need in your particular community versus families in your particular community, we're not going to let you count the units towards the site. I see your hand. You'll have a second. We're not going to let you count the units towards the subsidized housing inventory. Now, my own personal opinion is I part ways with our council on that. I think this particular community does have a need for this. I know that 10% of our seniors live in poverty. Someplace between 30 and 50% of them are housing insecure. I know that in Massachusetts, seniors spend $5,000 a year on average for medical costs. And I know that assisted living facilities in Massachusetts, on average, cost $5,600 a month. I'm 46 years old. I can't afford any of those things. And I don't know how people are going to do it when they're 80 and they're barely making ends meet. I don't know how they're going to do it. So I think we could make the argument, and it's entirely plausible from my point of view, that we could go forward with a project that would house seniors if we worked with the Department of Public, if we worked with DPH, but it might not be. And so we decided, well, let's float it by the town and see what the town thinks about removing that deed restriction and helping people of all age levels who also need housing. Because again, we know that 30% of all Grafton residents are housing insecure. And that's just Grafton residents. This is going to be open to people in the larger community. Right now, Massachusetts is short about 127,000 units to get up to the place where we would need to be if we were housing secure across the entire Commonwealth. I was just looking something up here on my Twitter that someone tweeted out. With an average construction cost of between $400,000 and $500,000 in Massachusetts, that's your average construction cost in Massachusetts, slightly lower in Grafton, but not that much lower, it would take over 200% of the annual state budget to meet the need to come up with all of these units. So there's a need for it here. I know that people are upset that it's there. I think that's evident by the fact that there are no questions about GSX, which is down the street, but there are going to be a lot of questions about this particular thing. But that's the idea behind this. If you're looking for a less dense project at 25 Worcester Street, this is the article for you. If you want to force us to build something that's just for senior housing, you can vote that way, and it's probably going to be a larger, more dense project, and it may or may not count towards the subsidized housing inventory. So that's my spiel.
And that might not be the only reason why we do a particular project. There's two schools of thought in the past that I've seen on the trust and in planning board, et cetera, is getting to SHI to provide the town with relief from 40B when it comes across the table. And you've seen some of the 40B developments in town, which are much greater density than would be allowed under current rules and regulations for subdivisions. It happens a lot. It will continue to happen if we're not in safe harbor, so to speak. if we are in safe harbor and we don't really care about SHI, and that could be another way the direction town goes, and just providing as much affordable housing as we possibly can from an ideological standpoint, which I think most of the people on the trust, including myself, would agree with. So you could do it that way. We could stick with what it was, but the town meeting by citizens petition, which most of the people in this room were here, everybody up here was there, was it was a good article. It passed overwhelmingly, and I understand what was said there. So the only way we can ask for more flexibility is to go back to town meeting. We're not trying to snub folks. We're just trying to get a little bit more flexibility on our property. Joanne, come on up, please. Yeah, right after Joanne. She's had her hand up for just about 30 minutes.
I've read a lot of stuff. I went on the state website. I read the original trust article signed by Peter Adams and Chris LeMay. It's right there blaringly. It says that unless you could prove that this need existed. And I just want to say that I just feel this utter and complete sense of distress that knowing that we have these projects, 300 units strong, 40 units strong. I don't know that Prentice will come, and we're not talking about Prentice and GSX because we know you don't even have a PNS. So we're not here to waste your time. But we do know you have Pine Street. We do know that you have the 40 apartments that you can count fully. So to go to the bodies that be right now and say, here we have 350 to 400 affordable units being offered in Grafton. We have no 55 and older. What are they going to do? Turn you down? How can you not show that we need it? It just is just so much disbelief that you are going to push this away and off. Who cares about profitability? Who cares about how many? If you can get 20 or 40 things there for seniors or 55 and older, no one's going to argue with you, and you're going to be able to count them all unless you're not selling them, unless you're selling them. So we're just saying, we just don't believe that taking this off is the right decision. We don't believe it, and I'm hoping we can get enough people out there to say you were gifted something for a purpose, and you should not be coming back to us now, especially in light of all the units coming on stream to tell us that we are not going to need this. Thank you.
I appreciate the comments, Joanne, and that's why this goes to town meetings, so the public meeting can have its discourse, and you can see what it wants. If people show up and they don't want to after we present an argument for what we want to do, they'll say no, and we'll move back to other concepts. There's absolutely no reason to get angry about this. This is the trust role. This is the role we're playing. This is the property that we were gifted. We're going back and saying, can we do something different with it? There shouldn't be a lot of.
Hey! Enough!
That's what it is.
May I
Okay?
ask a question?
Yes, and then Donna, why don't you come up?
Grown adults.
And I think Bruce's point is that this gives town meeting the opportunity to decide. We're not deciding for town meeting. But I don't understand why this is something that you
How
laugh
many-
at. That we're going to town meeting to ask.
Excuse me. How many units to be profitable, and who's done the studies to the number? Who's crunched the numbers for this?
So
That's senior housing.
for senior house, Donna, why don't you have a question real quick, because I brought you all the way up there, and then I'll get to both.
So Donna Stock, 238 McGill. I've been a fundraiser for 35 years. That's my profession, and I deal with donors and gifts all the time. And to me, as you said, this was gifted to them, gifted to the town. What message are you saying to any other resident or entity that wants to give something to the town with restrictions that they feel very strongly about and go against their wishes? It's like taking the name off of a building. And if we were to do that with a nonprofit and do something different from what was written and voted on or whatever it was, it would be a scandal, to tell you the truth.
Okay,
So I guess I'm just, this was entrusted to the town with certain restrictions, and for us to go back right now to the town meeting, which may be sparsely populated, we don't know, is to me, just, as I said, going against the family or the donor's wishes.
Well, the donor was the town meeting, so we're going back to the donor and expressing to the donor, look, if there's something else that you want to have done at the site, given how dense it's going to be, and I think density is a concern for some of the people in this room and some of the people in the neighborhood, then there's another option. And if the town says, no, keep going, we'll keep going. And just to discuss, the word profitability has been thrown around a lot.
I guess feasibility is a better term.
Yeah, feasibility is a much better term, okay? So, you probably know this
I
as
do.
well.
I'm
Okay.
very familiar. Yes.
Okay,
That's why I
so,
asked the question.
yeah, we're not gonna, amongst the board, we don't need to discuss it, but
Okay.
when you do this under the guise of 40B, developers are limited in how much of their overhead that they can recoup, okay? And that's by contract and that's by law. This actually happened with us, with the Pulte development, where the state came back in and found that the contractor had arguably exceeded the allowable profit under the law, which is ironically actually how we got this money. So we sued them and they settled for about $1 million, and now we have about $1.6 million. So there's $1 million of Pulte lawsuit settlement funds, and then about another $600,000 of money that we've saved up from the CPA over the years. Some of that money is going to be used to grease the skid with GSX. The rest of it will have left over, presumably, to help subsidize the cost for the developer to come in here and do this. Part of our calculus is, if we limit the size and the scope of whatever goes into 25 Worcester Street, that's going to cost us more. And it's going to limit our ability to help other people in the future with other projects. So that's something that we're going to have to discuss amongst ourselves when we have an idea and a concept that we want to move forward with. And I just wanted to touch on something that Joanne had said. I'm in a state of disbelief, too, about the DPH's position concerning seniors. And I disagree with council, but it's a quantifiable risk, right? So if we go forward and we're not given the flexibility that Bruce is talking about, chances are you're going to see something more dense at that site than you otherwise would have.
But isn't that your decision?
It is.
It is.
You don't have to allow that.
We shouldn't have a back and forth. If you got a question, just come on up.
Her hand is raised.
But please,
Yeah, my question is,
Could you-
I need you to come up to the microphone and just introduce yourself real quick, please.
Sally Hall, Sartell Road. What was wrong with the Habitat for Humanity offer, which
Alright.
wouldn't have cost the town anything?
So the Habitat for Humanity has been thrown around quite a bit. So the particular, Chris, I'll let you reference it.
Yep.
Please.
So I actually spoke, I reached back out to Hank Roush from Habitat for Humanity again today to discuss that specific. In terms of their development, so to say that it wouldn't cost the town any money, that's not true. The Affordable Housing Trust would have to partner and probably provide funding for Habitat for Humanity to develop the units.
At what percentage, do you have an idea of what percentage would?
I didn't discuss that in that much detail, what that partnership would look like. But I spoke with them again today and confirmed that from our previous conversations in March, which previous meetings discussed, typically the Worcester Habitat for Humanity does approximately 4 units in terms per year, and that's typically their capacity.
I thought that they talked about 8.
Over the course of a number of years, so 4 units per year over 2 years, maybe they get 8. So that was the concept that they talked about. What I've done is I reached out again and I asked for them potentially to put that in writing to put this issue to bed. That they have a lower capacity than certainly the 36 units that we're looking at for an annual goal. And I think in terms of a partnership with the Habitat for Humanity, one of the things that I was waiting for the letter to come in to present this, but in terms of looking at the housing production plan and potential partnerships with Habitat for Humanity, a better process would be looking at rehab programs, which the housing production plan actually identifies as a potential path forward. And that organization would be much better suited to a partnership for rehab programs. So I did express that to Habitat for Humanity that would be interested in pursuing that. And once we lay the groundwork on the staff level of what that might look like and get an idea of that, we can present that to the trust and to the town in terms of setting up a program for rehab.
Also, by the way, incredibly expensive work to do. So we looked at a rehab project back in 2013 in North Grafton, over by Prentice, but across the street some. And it was an old mill building, one of the ones that was first built here, about 1860 or so. beautiful bones on the inside, but it needed gotten a complete rehab. We started pricing it out with them, and it was $600,000 for 2 units. At the time, we had $600,000, so that would have been it. You know what I mean? So you see the dilemma here. We're not trying to be difficult and push something down people's throats, but we have over 400 units that we need to get out from under Chapter 40B. From my point of view, we've got an incredible need in the community that people could use this sort of housing in order to stabilize their lives. Spending all of the trust resources on 2 units would have been a dereliction of our duty. So that's when you get into the lower number of units, the startup costs, the design costs, the plans, the meetings, the lawyers, all that stuff costs exactly the same, right? But you're just getting fewer units.
Sure.
I know, and I'm probably,
I get this all day long. It's fine. We'll get to my question.
Well, I
Please.
see that there would be costs, but it's hard for me to believe that they would be
And
as
it's really,
huge
yeah,
as.
it's,
we haven't ruled any particular design or any particular concept out. We haven't decided. What I
Okay.
had mentioned at the beginning of the year is what I wanted the trust to have was as many options available to them as they could possibly have for the particular site. And like I mentioned in that process, there are some restrictions there, and if they don't want them restrictions, we go back to what's in our sandbox and we play in there. So, but that's kind of, that Habitat for Many might be something option we do. We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
So,
That's
Brittany.
what I wanted to know,
Okay.
basically. I thought that it was dead, but,
no,
you know.
there's no concept that's dead there.
yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Brittany,
Yeah,
please.
so I'm just curious as to who did the feasibility studies for this. You said an engineer did the plans.
Yep.
And those plans that he had shown earlier were for the senior affordable housing?
No, they were basically
for
they were for
if the
a
deed was-
traditional apartment building and complex. So
Okay.
we wanted to see what would fit on the acreage that was available. taking
Maximizing the
into-
unit density.
Yeah, and with the stormwater management and the new code that we'd have to adhere to, and then what we had for services there to make it, and then the market analysis we have not done for it.
Okay.
But that's typically something that's going to be restricted on the developer side as we go out
Yeah.
to that next phase when we decide what we want to do and we go pitch it and see if it works.
Yeah, just trying to understand the constraints. So the constraint to not have it be senior affordable housing is the feasibility from developer standpoint.
That's what I'm
or-
told. I mean, I'd like to hear from a developer on that,
Yeah.
you know.
So
And what developers do you usually partner with? Is it a for-profit developer? Is it a non-profit developer? Because typically the ones that I've worked with are non-profits,
Right.
like CDCs, NDCs. So I'm just curious as to what developers you've talked to.
Bruce would know more about that.
we've talked to for-profit, Habitat, and a few other freelance consultants that work
Are there
in the
local
40B.
ones that are, like POA is one that I know of.
We used Remax in Westboro. It was a-
Westboro?
Yeah. Casey.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
close.
I mean, Worcester would be one that I would probably think would have a non-profit developer that would do this kind of
Oh,
work.
and I'm sorry. He was not nonprofit.
Okay.
He was a for-profit developer.
Okay, you guys open for me to
Yes.
do some
Very-
research and find
absolutely.
someone? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're open for as open as we
Because
can.
typically they're a
possibly
little easier to work with, and they'll work with you on the money. They know grants like the back of their hand.
Which
Yeah.
is another
Sure.
thing that we have not discussed yet is grant opportunities
Yeah.
and things of that nature.
So it might be able to have us have a little bit more piece
Yep.
of the pie there.
Please do.
That would be fantastic. The problem is, like Brittany, is that it's like the chicken or the egg. So the trust has never done something like this. They were never gifted land like this in the past, and they've never developed units
Yeah.
in the past. So our expertise level to handle this type of stuff is kind of self-made. And then to couple that with the fact that we have to have all these discussions in this particular session and
Right.
not offline makes it even more difficult to try to convey a message and have an understanding of what the trust is actually capable of doing. So in my experience and from what I've seen in my days on the planning board and in the community, is 40Bs they're traditionally done by for-profit. So any expertise that I lend to the trust as far as seeing those things get developed is typically what I've seen come through the system. I know there's a lot of other opportunities, especially grant opportunity, one of which we looked at was partnering with the housing authority in town, which manages
Yeah.
the community's assisted living, but the housing authority. But unfortunately, they're not building, and they're not willing to partner with us on a building, even it's our land. So we've kind of explored that, and we haven't found any ability to actually marry it together. But if there are other nonprofits, then you can bring them to the table.
And have you thought of, instead of just dropping the straight deed restriction of senior affordable housing, just changing it to something else? Or just dropping it strict?
Well, we're asking to drop it straight.
I mean, because
So-
I've seen like multi-generational affordable housing, which is pretty popular in Boston.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefit to having senior people with younger families and younger kids. So
That's
That
exactly
is something that we
exactly
reviewed
right.
a couple weeks ago,
You
or
know-
a couple months ago.
Removing the age restriction doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to service that population. In fact, we could be servicing them in a way that's actually more
I think they
advantageous.
just want a little assurance. You
Right.
know?
No, I totally understand that.
We can also provide
I do.
a concept and a plan design and a development design that's actually gonna tailor itself to a
Yeah.
55 plus
Because to
community
be honest, those
anyways.
plans, not the greatest.
Well, they're not plans, they're concepts. We just
The
wanted to
density.
find out what we could put there.
Yeah.
If the density is too high, well, you know, if you look at the density that has been other opportunities in town, they're pretty dense.
Not in that type of zoning district, I don't think.
Well,
I'd
so
have to
to
do
yours
some
is
research,
39,
but-
it's on 2 acres of land, that's being built as we speak.
In a
GSX
single-family home.
is 140, no, they're apartment complexes.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I
not
was
different
saying.
zoning there.
So that's part of why in the presentation I wanted to
it's-
call out the other multifamily
R20
units that
Yeah.
are less than a mile. It's the same zoning
zoning.
district, and it's 26 units
R20
in a
or
similar
R40,
size
But-
but either
lot.
way, ZBA.
Is
problem.
the center of town considered a historic district?
It's
at
out
all?
of
It
the
is. It's on the
historic
National Historic Register.
Sean, you got something?
So we
I
have
think
to go through that process.
57 Old Dock
I don't
Road.
believe this.
You've got a new board member who seems to know quite a bit about this topic.
Yes.
You've got an open seat, and there's quite a bit of controversy on this topic. It just seems to me it might make sense to push this down the road and get a little more information before
Could be.
you go to town meeting.
Well, one of the funny things is, this isn't something that we were going to be doing urgently or imminently. This was always something that was going to be, we were going to do deliberately with a lot of forethought and planning that went into it. I think the way that the narrative has developed over the past several months gave people the impression that there were going to be 5-story buildings next year.
That's why people are here.
Yeah. Well, so that's
We get it.
So
very much not the case.
So if there's not a rush, then it seems to me that it would make sense to fill the board,
Well, see, but,
look into some of the concepts that we're talking about here,
Right.
and then go to town meeting.
and that might be the direction we take tonight, is we may table this, we may say we don't want to do this, but we just got a new member. We have another one available,
We're not going to say we don't want to do this.
This is how we,
No, I understand.
this is how we have to do this process.
I hear what you guys are saying. You're balancing a lot of different things. I think half people here, more than half the people here hear about density.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
The other half you hear about design.
Density is the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
It's,
The
I get it.
elderly housing is also a very important issue to all of us, right? So I think everybody's on the same page. It just feels like it's something that's maybe being rushed.
well, I don't necessarily think we're all on the same page as far as what we want to see for producing units, but that's going to vet itself out over
Well,
time.
I think most people want to have fair housing stock in town. Where that is and how dense it is in certain parts of town, I think we're probably not all on the same page. But you drive by that site every day going home, right? You're not going to want to see a 6-story building on that. The plans that were put in place are not real plans.
Nobody's
So-
talking about 6 story.
Yeah.
I want to make
Whatever-
that clear.
whatever,
Nobody's talking about that.
60 units on 2 acres on that site probably is probably not
Yep.
going to be.
Well, again, Sean,
We would get
part
there,
of-
Sean, I
But
imagine.
we don't have time to even argue about all those things right now. My only point is there's enough controversy around this. There are enough open spots in the board and new members of the board that it seems to me that this is not the time to go to town meeting and ask for a zoning, to ask for something that was a deed restriction to be lifted.
Yep, sure.
I understand the point. I just want to make the point that, again, this is part of the reason you saw the concepts in the way you did is because, again, with open meeting law, we can't have this discussion offline. Bruce can't come to me and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Right.
And have that discussion off camera. The idea had to start someplace about like, okay, we've got $1.6 million. We got GSX coming down the road. We're going to have to subsidize that somehow. How can we make this feasible?
No, I understand. I
know.
think the difficulty.
I'm gonna get
is-
to you, ma'am. You can put your arm
I
down.
think that, I think
You're
that,
welcome.
I think the difficulty comes in comments around the density that we want, you know, things that, and not everybody's been in all the meetings other than you guys. I don't know what density you want.
Right.
I know what density I see on some plans that don't look that well thought out to me.
Well, they're just
I don't know
concepts
what
again.
you-
They're not really
Yeah,
plans.
they're just what fits on their building wise that
But-
puts all the infrastructure pieces in there that we needed to put in there.
I mean, that's a cost
Understood.
to get those plans done. I'm assuming you guys are fronting that a little
We did
bit.
fund it, yeah. Yeah. We also funded Hudson Street too, so we have some concept and design plans for there as well.
But
We'll
those are,
introduce
but those
when
are,
we get
those are contemplate a maximum density, right?
money.
And the question
One of them
does
is,
the-
yes.
Does the trust believe that you want maximum density on that site? Because
Yeah, and what I mentioned before is I don't know what the trust wants because I was providing as much information to them in a myriad of different ways, and that's gonna change and be amorphic as we go through, like you just mentioned, with new backgrounds and new people coming with new ideas, and also as we go through, and as you're well aware, when going through the public comment section, and we're introducing it a little bit more.
the
So-
main point I wanted to make is I just think you would gain a lot more trust if you put this off to the next town meeting.
Oh, you mean the warrant article?
The warrant article. I think if you put the warrant, I think to go before, you know, sort of a light agenda town meeting with something that has substantial consequence, where you don't expect, you know, I think most people don't expect a big turnout for the meeting. It's not the standard meeting of the year where you have the kind of turnout that you would have for an agenda item like this. And I just think you'd gain more credibility and more trust if you put it off to the next town meeting.
It's certainly something we consider. We appreciate the input, ma'am.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up also the density question. I live in that neighborhood. I live right across from 25 Worcester. I notice we have a traffic problem in town already. Since Boulevard was made one way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but North Street backs up all the way.
Sure.
For, you know, there's a period of time when it takes quite a while to go through town. That intersection there, right in the middle of town, you know, right by the town hall, is dangerous. Nobody knows what to do there. It's awkward when somebody wants to turn left going down Brigham Hill or what's it called, Millbury Street, and somebody wants to turn left onto North Street. It's awkward. There's not a good way to do it. You look like you think it's a non-issue, but I'm telling you, it is an issue.
I'm not avoiding the concern. I'm just saying the concern has to be.
Well,
It's something that we have to vet as we go through our process.
well, as you go
Decide.
through your process, watch the traffic because, you know, it's only going to be compounded by exponentially. If you add 60 units on that location, you're going to have to put in a bunch of traffic lights because it's just, I mean, it barely works now. And if you add that many units, you're going to have a traffic nightmare.
I'm sure
Do you have to
something
submit a traffic analysis for
we do.
anything you're building?
Yes, so during the planning board process, which again, any project on this location would likely trigger, we require a traffic study to be provided. And that will actually have the engineers go through, do the traffic counts, and they'll prescribe if additional improvements need to be made.
And then if they do, who funds that? The town funds if the lights
Not
needed or.
necessarily.
Not necessarily,
'Cause it wouldn't
be a
it would be
project.
negotiated at the planning board process in terms of off-site improvements.
I've seen it go a bunch of different ways
Yeah.
from projects we've had in the past.
Yeah.
Same with.
And are you
streetlighting, things of that
obligated to
nature.
if a study is done and they find that you need to add traffic lights, are you obligated to then put in the traffic lights? Is it an obligation?
I
or-
can't speak for the planning board, or I can't speak for the ZBA or how this goes through, but in the past, when I've seen projects come through that have been, that had the need, typically the developer has footed the bill for them, or just abandoned the project altogether. So,
Well, yeah, because
Yeah, we're not a railroad, so we're not gonna get alleviated of a lot of the concerns that other developers have. So if you followed Prentice Place, which was a few years ago, well, 4 years ago now that it went through the LIP, it's been 2 years with our ZBA going back and forth until there was a finally negotiated settlement, which is the same amount of buildings that was proposed, just less density. But the density for a 2-acre lot of land, especially the land that was developable on that parcel, which is only about 1.6 acres, it's 39 units, or 38, close to 40.
well, it has
So-
to do with location in this case. You know.
So your point's well taken.
It's valid.
One thing that I would say to that is, you know, clearly we've articulated tonight one of the goals that we have is to try to get to that 10% in our subsidized housing inventory. What that does for us is it allows us more control over developments all over town.
Right.
One of the issues that I have with the traffic studies is it looks at traffic very locally and on some of the corridors, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't look at all of the development happening all over town. So you have this very local view of traffic, and you typically stay within the same conditions on a given set of roads that they're looking at, and it'd be a D or an E or an F or whatever, unless you're adding 1,000 units. Traffic conditions on any individual project don't really move the dial in enough for, I'm just telling you, but one thing that we could do as a town is we could drive our affordable housing threshold up to the point where we can now start having better discussions with the developers, with the developments all over town, which are the 40B developments, and that's what's going in right now.
Okay.
All over town, and that's what's driving the
I-
traffic all over town.
I understand that, but not all over town is the center of town. The
Everybody
one
goes through the
intersection
center.
Where everyone has to go through to get through Grafton.
I get it. I'm just saying there's a balance here, and all of the traffic in town goes through that hub. So
That one.
so there's some significant benefit to us getting to the point where we can have a lot more control over developments that are currently unfriendly 40Bs.
That will expose itself as we go through the process too.
Well, I think that particular location is problematic.
Let's, ma'am, please, with the green shirt. Ron, I'll get to you too. No worries.
Gloria Paradiso, 2 Cold Spring Drive. I hear you keep saying that we need to get to that place, the 10%, and I totally understand that. But I thought I understood in previous discussions and the points that Joanne brought up with the developments, we're pretty much there. Is that not true?
So no. So again, in terms of the subsidized housing inventory and requesting new units, until those projects have occupancy permits, they can't
Right.
be.
But
So
I-
those projects could be between 2 and 5 years out of being completed.
So I
Yeah.
thought we just already also determined that we're so far down the road that it's highly unlikely that those will fall through. So I get we don't have the occupancy permit, but we're well on our way to that 10%.
So-
I guess that's the point I was trying to make, again.
So yes and no. So again, so the in terms of those projects, it could be between 2 and 5 years of having occupancy and actually collecting those units to get to that 10%, right? And that's not even a guarantee. In the meantime, within that time span, the community is still susceptible to 40Bs, which again, it limits the local control and what the community can put on restrictions and in terms of reviewing. It's a very limited view of what local control can do when a private developer uses the 40B process, and that's why you've heard the term the unfriendly 40B, which
Right,
is
so there's nothing that can be done to go to the state and say, here's where we are with these projects, we just don't have the occupancy permit? Because following that logic, in my mind, and maybe I'm mistaken, there's nothing that 25 Worcester Street is gonna do to help you in any time soon if these projects take 2 to 5 years to complete.
Well, yeah.
It is something that we've considered here as a trust too. Is
So,
the timing
So-
of a
This
particular
is
project.
not gonna
So-
help your problem. Your problem is gonna be
So-
resolved with the 400 units in
So-
2 to 5 years by the time 25 is completed.
so again, there's certain thresholds that can be met to get in the meantime before having the 10%. where if you produce a certain number of units annually, you can get 1 year safe harbor or 2 year safe harbor, depending upon that development. And again, even when you meet the 10%, the job isn't done. At a certain point, that 10% certification is going to lapse, and you're back to square one. And so developing units in the meantime will help you to get that ratio and maintain the 10% so you can maintain certification and safe harbor status.
The town will continue to grow, and yes, the projects that are there now, even though they're phased over the next 2 to 5 years, should bring us close, if not to the 10%. That's why we're considering deploying a lot of our capital and resources to help the Upton Street project along to get to 25%, because that will, with those and Pine Street and Sotiers development that are coming online, put us past the 10% threshold. It also, from a ideological standpoint, we can get 39 affordable units in town up on Upton Street, which would be well more than we're ever going to get on 25 Worcester Street. And
If you get those
Thank you.
39 units, that gives you an additional year of being able to put off additional 40B projects?
Well,
Is that how it works?
once a comprehensive plan has been achieved, you can get safe harbor from the process like Chris was mentioning. But for us to, if we're looking at SHI and SHL, I'm sorry, Brittany, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm just curious if you have a breakdown of all these projects on the docket, and then you have the number of units that are going to be counting towards the 40B.
Online,
And just to
there's a,
see. Okay. And it's all broken down so everyone can understand it.
I
Yeah.
kind of have a packet for you too.
Okay, yeah, I'm just a little out of the
Yep,
loop.
no worries. No worries.
What is the current ratio?
We need about 370 something units. It shifts because every year you get non-affordable units that come online. So if we're at 5,100 units and next year we're at 5,200 units from the subdivisions that are coming online, our 10%, of course, it's a moving target for us. That what Chris was bringing up in the presentation is, as we stand now from what we have on inventory, we need a certain amount of units every year to get to 10%. We're going to get a big chunk of them with the projects that are there. If we're talking about SHI and providing immunity for the town, so to speak, as our strategy going forward, which I agree with in one part, and another part, the need for affordable housing in this state amongst communities that are underserved is astronomically high. So I don't currently believe that SHI should be something that we should solely be achieving. We should be looking at providing affordable houses for as many people as possible. Now, that might be where we kind of divert from the locality, but that's why we have a trust and that's why it's autonomous. But yes, we should have enough units coming online, if those three, to fulfill our SHI quota, probably for 5 or 6 years at least, unless there's another big boom, which very well could happen. But if you were to look at, our master plan and read the actual thing and look at what our build out is, we can stay ahead of that 10%. With these 3 projects over the course of their lives.
and not for nothing, but
Joe.
just 3 years ago, the guy sitting in this chair during a select board meeting told us that we were never going to reach 10%, we shouldn't even try. And it was because we pushed, and because we made it a priority, and because the town administration has been partnering with developers, and because this trust has been pushing. Looks like we're going to get there. And like Bruce said, I'll be candid with you, I'm not really in it for the SHI. I'm in it to provide people with houses that they can afford.
It certainly gives us greater flexibility to deal with 25 Worcester Street.
You just define SHI.
So
yeah.
SHI is the subsidized housing inventory. It's for all the communities in Massachusetts. DHCD maintains that list, and it's what they use as a metric in terms of certifying plans.
Just a quick question.
It has to be done up here for us. And then Joanne and then Donna, please.
The delta between, I think you mentioned that affordable in Grafton for a 2-bedroom is 1,300, is that right?
Is that what's in the housing production plan?
I think it was 1,400.
Yeah,
approximately.
So the HUD rent limits, as most recently the FY 2022 fair market rent, as documented on the HUD website, is $1,491 for a 2-bedroom unit.
And what is the market rate?
Market rate is for, depends on the area of town. But
For the house, for
For a 2-bedroom, no, for a 2-bedroom,
apartment,
yeah.
somewhere around $1,200. Maybe
No, that's not
1,500.
Market rate?
1,500?
no.
No,
Well,
it's
if
like
the-
double.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's like
Well, if
1,800.
the low, I'm just trying to, do these units have to be sort of physically owned, or can it be done through subsidies? rent subsidy.
No, there's a myriad of ways you can subsidize a house. Matter of fact, one of the things we could do on 25 Worcester Street when we get to that point is provide further subsidy to make it even more affordable
To the
for a subset of a
tenants
community.
or
Yes,
to the
tenants.
tenants?
Yes. Yeah. I know profit got thrown around a little bit. That's not our nature to provide profitability for a developer.
Sorry, that was the word you used, so.
Yeah, I know, and it's just like when I say game, I shouldn't have said it.
Reiterated that
yeah.
as well.
Our goal is to produce the housing, and that may mean we have to partner with the developer to get that density or get what we want out of it. And some developers will do it for nonprofit, but they're still going to need to make sure they make their ends. And then some do it for profit. So, depending on who we partner with and what they're looking for, we may need to make it more attractive for them to do it the way we want it. And we provide capital for that, just like we may provide capital for GSX to get to 25%. We have those controls because we own the land and we can set those parameters and we can set design parameters and things like that. But, at the end of the day, we'll probably be partnering with somebody to do it. Now, it could work out in 100 different ways, like I mentioned. But we don't have to be at 80% or 70% of AMI. We can actually explore, subsidizing it directly through us to provide an even better opportunity for the units that are there. So there's a bunch of ways we can do it. Joanne, please, and then Dawn.
I just wanted to say that if anybody.
Joanne,
Joanne, could you come up?
you gotta come
You
up
can
here.
go on mass.gov, and there is a list of all of these towns that signed up to be part of this process, and it lists the SHI, and numerous towns are nowhere near even 5 and not getting towards 10.
Yep.
Oh, we know.
So I don't know what, as you said, I would prefer you to hear you talk about caring about people needing affordable housing than meeting this number. But I think that your approach, certainly to the populace, has been, oh my God, we're at 5, we need to be at 10, this is why we're doing this. So maybe you can look at that as a board and come up with a better way to communicate
That could be. Yep. Thank you for the input. I appreciate it. Donna.
I'd also add that there's a reason why most communities aren't at 10% is because every single time there's an affordable housing proposal, it's met with some degree of hostility. These are hard to do.
Donna.
It seems to me like the warrant article is something that people are concerned about, that 4 days from now that we would be talking about reversing that deed and the restrictions on it. You've got a new member of the board who already has demonstrated she's very competent and she knows what she's doing in this space and has already offered to bring some more information to this. You've got a vacancy as well. I guess, why are we doing this? Or I would respectfully ask you to pass over this article on Saturday. October meeting, as somebody said. Sean said October is not where we do the meat of our meetings. It's usually in the May meeting. So I don't understand why, or maybe this is a way that you can demonstrate that you do need the time, that we won't be voting on a concept and that we will have more information that will help inform the community when you want to come forward and proceed with the plan.
Which is, that's why we're here, Donna.
Okay.
This is the avenue we have to do it. So,
Be a good faith gesture.
does anybody else have, ma'am, please? Yeah, I'm actually, Ron, I told you I would get to you. And then as soon as he's finished, please.
Ron Warwick, 32 Worcester Street. The young lady mentioned 60 units on 25 Worcester Street. That obviously comes from your rendering, which referenced the 96 parking spaces. When you combine that with what they're doing at 27 Upton Street, there's 200 there. So within 3 years, we have the potential of 300 parking spaces. No offense, and I'm sure you would do it anyway, but no one needs a traffic study to know that 300 parking spaces within 400 yards of the common is definitely going to be a problem.
Okay,
Right.
so,
That was just a statement. I do have a question.
okay.
2, actually. The first one is for the man behind the curtain up there. How far back in time do the Affordable Housing Trust videos go? Do you know?
I've only been taping them since I've been chair. So I don't think they were taped in the past when I was
Okay.
there.
Then I'll ask the question differently. Did you have?
Jack?
We have meetings, not necessarily Affordable Housing Trust, but meetings going as far back as 2009 on archive, on physical copy. But I'd have to look into exactly how far back Affordable Housing Trust meetings go. But I'm sure it's years.
So we'll take a request to you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I got-
Thank you, Jack. So what Jack had said is that they go back to 2009. There may or may not be physical tapes of the actual Affordable Housing Trust. Now, I served back then, not back in 2009, but over the past 10 years or so, and we never taped them.
Okay.
There have been some situations where they were taped because it was a joint meeting with the select board or things of that nature. So as long as you can tag it that way and find them, then you can find some of those resources.
What I was looking for was to find out whether or not, if you folks had any public hearings before Mr. Prisby sponsored that warrant article to take the land.
I don't think so.
No, they
So
don't.
you didn't ask anybody's opinion. I'm not sure why you'd be surprised if you're getting this now, since you didn't have it.
No, we're not.
Let me tell you, I'm not. This is the least surprising thing about my entire year.
Well, your reaction tells us you're shocked by it.
I'm really not, Ron. This is very much par for the course.
Is that all you had, Ron?
That was it. Yeah.
Ma'am, please.
I'll just mention, check right now, the meetings on the website, on the GCTV website go back to 2016. And Jack said there may or may not be hard copies that are not online.
I have just become aware of this because of the town meeting.
Okay.
And I am a senior citizen, and I come up to the town to do exercising and things like that 4 days a week. In this past week, I have talked to, since this has become an issue, over 100 seniors. And let me tell you that they are all upset. And I understand that this is the last meeting that's going to be held at 7:30 at night. From now on, they're going to be held on Saturdays. So these seniors feel like, number one,
Wait, what meeting?
Well,
Clarify the
town
meeting.
town meeting.
if that's approved.
Right.
Okay.
Which it should be, because the seniors can't come out and vote, or they don't want to come out and vote at 7 o'clock at night, or they have cataracts, or for a number of reasons, they can't make it.
Sure.
So when they saw where this article was placed, number one, because it's on a night, they feel they can't come. Number two, they feel like it was shoved to the bottom of the agenda, number 25, so they wouldn't stay. And they're really feeling used and abused, I gotta tell you. They're not happy. So my question is, I have several. If you have 20 to 60 units, how many bedrooms in these units, and how much impact is it going to have on the school system?
Okay, so there's a couple different questions in there if I can field these.
Okay.
Do you have more questions? Or
Yeah.
do you
I
want,
do.
Okay, do you want us to wait
Okay,
to
okay,
answer
I'll
each
give them
one?
all
Or?
to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the, I guess I should tell you, I have a real estate background, and I also do fundraising, so I'll get to that. But what is the height of these buildings, and does our fire department have equipment to reach the height of these buildings?
Okay,
Do we
so-
have 3-story, 5-story, what are we
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, so before you go through
Wait.
the list of questions specific to the buildings, again, we don't have plans for any of these buildings. I can't tell you what the square footage is gonna be, I can't tell you what the height's gonna be, I don't know what the design's gonna look like. That's way, way, way down the
But you
road.
know they're gonna be two bedroom or more,
Possibly.
so we're going to have more children.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so let's back up. If it's a senior development, probably not. If it's,
I'm not talking about a senior development.
Okay,
I'm talking
so-
about what you're planning that is not a senior development, and you're not gonna guarantee seniors housing in there.
okay, but,
And if you
Keep-
did that, you wouldn't have such a problem.
okay, that's fair enough. I don't know what my problem is, I suppose. Let me just say this to you. What is the impact upon the Grafton school system? As I sit here right now, I can't tell you, I don't know the
Right.
answer to that question, but let me ask you a question. What is the impact on families who are underhoused? What is the impact on families that have to make choices about paying medical bills and sending their kids to school with appropriate learning tools? There are families out there that are struggling. People who have children need affordable places to live too, okay? So, impact on Grafton schools, I don't know. But I'm in it to help those families if I can.
Well, may I speak?
You may.
My feeling about this, and the seniors' feeling about this, is we've all gone through this, and we have made the best of it, and we have gotten to this point in our life, and I own a home. But for the many people in Grafton and the people who are on the waiting list for senior housing, and as you said, it's a wonder they can make ends meet. The seniors who are living on their pensions, which may be gone, husbands that are gone, wives are gone, they don't have the money.
they've supported this town for a lot of years. They've lived in this town. I grew up in this town since 1957. And I just think that the seniors need more consideration. And I'm going to tell you that, let me ask one more question. What is the bus that goes through town?
The WRTA,
Yeah, what bus?
the Worcester Regional Transportation.
When does that go?
I've never seen it.
I'd have to look up the schedule.
Yeah, there is a bus that goes through.
Every day?
No.
Every
Is it every day? Yeah, all right.
What time? What time was this?
Guys, hold on. First, hold on.
Don't wanna get too far
We're
off
not
track.
the Worcester Regional Transportation Association
Right,
here, okay?
but you said that was one of the pluses of putting that there, was because there was bus.
It's one of.
There is a
It's
bus
not the
that goes
primary
through.
driver.
We signed on to it about 6 years ago. I think I was still on the board at the time.
We can have Chris look into
So-
it and find out. I don't think anyone knows.
All right,
We'll
so
look
the
into
bus
it.
issue.
The school issue we can get
Chris, you
back
can look
to
into
as well.
that for future reference. Yep.
And if you're looking at 20 to 60 units, you've got to be looking at 40 to 120 cars.
Yep.
Possibly.
And that's no guest spaces.
Possibly.
Possibly, but you've got to think that every family, a husband and a wife, are going to each have a car.
Possibly.
Because they have to go.
Again,
One of the
So-
things we'll be required to do is provide a traffic analysis.
That's correct.
So there's
So-
no way to avoid that. It's not something we would get around.
So I'm asking you to remove this article and make it something that seniors can come and vote on, because they're not going to be able to come, and they don't want to come at night at 7:30 and then sit until the very last article. It looks like you're trying to shove it under the rug.
Okay, first of all, we're not in charge of where the articles are in
Yeah,
the warrant.
so can I just address that?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So it's typical, and it is, I don't know if it's a tradition, but citizen articles and articles that are not typical business that the town undertakes, like budgets and sewer easements and other things, those things always go at the end of the warrant articles. That's just how it goes. The town organizes all of the routine fund transfers and paying bills and all of that kind of stuff first, and then they add other things that come from other bodies in town and citizen articles. So there's nothing nefarious about where this is. In town meeting, it just happened to fall towards the end, and so that's how it goes. And I think
Can you request to change it?
well, no, not
For
at
a
this
good,
point.
valid reason?
The warrant is closed, so it is what it is. This is what we're going to town meeting with. We can discuss
But
passing over this, but
I'm glad you brought it up.
placement of it is
We'll
what
make
it
it
is.
part of the
So-
discussion when we get to that phase.
So it
which
would
we need
be
to get
more
to pretty
senior
quickly.
friendly if it was at a time that seniors felt that their opinion was was given any respect.
And we
that
have
they
a
can
select
go
board
to this
representation
meeting.
here that will probably convey that message back to the select board. But the select
So
board
if they
signs
could
the
move this to another town meeting that's going to be on a Saturday during the day when they can get a ride, when they can come, that would be really nice. So I just want to make a couple more points. That space that we're talking about, I went to school at that space when it was a school. And it's very park-like, and it's lovely, and it would be a lovely place for senior citizens. Not a lot of impact on the neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood that you want to jam in all these housing units. And I don't have any animosity to people, helping people with families. We've all had families. We've all worked hard. We've all had to make ends meet. So it's not like this isn't new to us. It's really new to us. And it's new to us on the basis that we have children who are trying to live in towns like this because they can't afford it anymore. So we're as much impacted on all of these levels, but more specifically senior centers, senior living. So my ask is that you take this article off of the town meeting for this Monday night. And I want to tell you that this is going to impact the future of any gifts you get. I have raised millions of dollars in fundraising. And I have to tell you, there is nothing more that would kill somebody's desire to give something than to see somebody take somebody else's name off of something or use something not for what it was designed for, and that's senior housing.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Spinney,
Yeah.
I'd just like to make one point on that. I think it's wholly appropriate that since town meeting gifted this with a certain idea based on a citizen's petition, that we go back to town meeting and ask if it's okay that we change the idea going forward. I think it's completely appropriate to do that.
It is completely appropriate.
I hear what people are saying about the timing of it. I hear that, but I think it's completely appropriate to go to town meeting with a warrant article.
Do you have to be in person to vote, or can you do an absentee ballot?
It's
You've got to be there.
traditional oldie
Yep.
Yankee.
We heard the seniors when they asked in a couple of springs ago, when they asked to change town meeting to Saturday. We heard that. It was one of the select board members which brought it up to actually change the language to change the timing of the meeting to be Saturday. So we hear the concerns that the seniors have around timing as well.
Sir.
Bob Foley, 45 South Street. So did you guys go in front of the finance committee with this article?
We did.
And did I miss something? What did they?
I don't know. I haven't looked at what their output was. I know it was.
The only thing I saw was,
You know,
it basically, is anybody here from the finance committee?
Yeah. So the finance committee discussed it. We didn't really get into a lot of depth in the discussion. There was only one member who voted against recommending passage.
Did you not write a blurb? Did I miss the blurb?
So yeah, we usually do write the blurb.
Yeah, you usually do. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of your responsibility as a committee.
And
Finance committees.
Yes.
He'll take that back for you, but.
Right, and I'm sorry that we didn't do that. I noticed too late. So
That's another reason to pass over the article.
but it's not just for this article. Like, I want to be clear, that was not like, oh, let's not write one for the affordable housing one.
But that's why you write one for every article. I was on the finance committee for 10 years. We never had an article without a blurb.
Okay, so we can take that up with FinCom, but what you're suggesting to us is that it didn't get its proper diligence
And you
with
should,
FinCom.
and you should pass
We
over.
should pass over.
Because
Thank you for that.
because the people didn't get the information that they normally expect.
We only control what we proposed as a town body and town officers on the article. So we have direct authority over whether or not we ask. Now, town meeting will decide if we can pass it over. It's not our decision. We can suggest it to the
Right, but if you recommend we pass over, it's your article, everybody's gonna pass over it, right?
But Bob, let me ask
That
you a
may be the
question.
case.
If Dan's position is no blurbs are written for this year's warrant, is your recommendation we pass over all of the warrant articles?
No.
Just this one?
Why is this one different?
No, there were none written for any article.
Yeah,
that's enough, Joanne. Come on.
So, Dan, is that not
That's-
a recommendation?
Yeah, I guess so. You know.
Did you have any other questions?
Which is what we usually do.
I hear you and I get it. Thank you.
Actually, can you just clarify that?
Were none written, or?
So I just want
1
to
second.
clarify that the finance committee, what they wrote was, the finance committee recommends the passage of Article 25 to remove the age restrictions placed on the deed to 25 Worcester Street.
There's no information there. That's zero info.
That actually seems in keeping with my experience with a lot of work.
Why? That's
All right, so before we get too far
All right,
back
well-
and forth. All right, so
This is one of
Okay,
the
listen.
I want to
listen.
put an end to the nefarious comments
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
It's
We
not a
told you what our
nefarious
intent.
comment. I'm trying to show you why people are so skeptical.
So are you suggesting that there is some sort of conspiracy where we teamed up with
Edward.
FinCom not to write a blurb on this one and every other warrant
No,
article?
they're just
I don't want to go
Like,
to
come on.
Point of
Like,
order.
come
bits
on.
of information
Mr.
that
Chairman.
Folks, we're going off the rails a little bit here. First of all, you're there and not up here, so we're going to go back to the hand raising bit. So Amy in the back and then. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Marr. I live at 36 Ferry Street, so I live nowhere near any of this. And I don't drive through the common every day, and I don't know about the traffic. I just know that I've been sitting in a room with a lot of angry people for an hour, and I want to apologize for all the outbursts that you've had to sit through. This is not how we do business in Grafton. I speak for myself tonight. I do not speak for the school committee. However, I wanted to address two things. One, for those of you who are looking for the bus route, it's Route B. It stops Monday through Friday in Riverdale, Rockdale, South Grafton, Fisherville, Grafton Town Common, Stop and Shop, and the MBTA station. That's Route B. Monday through Friday. I don't have.
Between
You can look it up.
Yeah, we're
between
So-
7:30 and 4 p.m. every day.
The reason I'm really up here is to talk about the New England School Development Council's projections on the impact of development on the schools. A few years ago, and I think this report is dated November of 2019, based on all of the projects in the pipeline at that time, including some that have been dumped that are not happening. The projected increase in enrollment was 216 students by the year 2030. That is a 7% increase. Shortly before we reach that point, we would have to start adding on to some of our school buildings. We're going to get to that point eventually, but we're looking at 2030. If all of the projects that were in the pipeline came to fruition, all of them, and they're not going to. So we've bought ourselves a little bit more time. If anybody wants to see this report, I'm happy to send it to you. You can go online, look at the school committee page, get my email address, and I'll send it. It's got lots of great charts. There's one thing that they identified, however, that I want to caution people about, and that is a recent trend of grandparents being the sole caregivers of school-aged children. They pointed this out as happening in Grafton and increasing in Grafton, and it's increasing in other areas of the state as well. I don't know the reasons behind it. I'm not going to get into that. But what I do know is that saying that this is a senior-only development does not mean that there will be zero impact. There will be some impact, and it will increase over time. The seniors that move into this housing, assuming they're all from within Grafton, and we know they won't be, they will vacate their 2, 3, 4-bedroom homes, which will then be bought by families with school-aged children. And that's all factored into this report. Thanks.
And just to dovetail on that, we did have a couple articles that were presented, and I think were passed around, that if it was an age-restricted 55 plus, you cannot restrict the residents from having juveniles under their umbrella. And they were very direct with that. It's pretty easily spelled out that you're not allowed to tell them who they can and can't have living in their units. Okay, so please.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And Margaret White, Old Upton Road. I just want to say that the motivation for me, and I think I'm guessing for other people in here, is that it's been misinterpreted that we're not interested in affordable housing because nothing could be further from the truth. I think it's a really important part of this town. And one of the reasons why I love it so much is because I feel like it's a community that really deserves to have places for everyone that they can afford to live in. And I also want to say thank you for your service. Sounds like you're doing a wonderful job, and I applaud you for what you're doing. We are getting a lot more affordable housing in this town, so thank you very much. And forgive me if this has been covered, but if this restriction is removed at town meeting, are there any restrictions on the land at all?
What's the language of the warrant article, Gina?
The article just is a straight conveyance. The deed restriction is just an attachment that has the language in the warrant article attached to the deed, but the deed solely in the trust's name. So it would basically mean that the trust owns it outright. Now the trust directive is to produce units, and for us to go and to do something that wasn't to that end would be inappropriate.
Okay.
Not only inappropriate, but probably illegal.
Probably, yeah. But I haven't chased that rabbit to, you know.
I mean, I think that would be important to know because it was given to the Affordable Housing Trust with a restriction, and then if there's no restriction, that just seems, I mean, that would be concerning to me.
Can I just speak to your concern there for
Sure.
1 second? Maybe say something that will allay that fear. I've been doing this for 15 years. There are more popular things that I could be doing with my time. Over the course of the past year, since this proposal started to become public, I've had people in here try to recall me when I was on the Board of Selectmen. I've had some seriously unflattering things said about me publicly. We had letters written into the Grafton board when I was on the board, and I've sat here along with my fellow trust members for the better part of 2 hours in front of an angry crowd. I don't do that so I can just get land and sit on it and not produce affordable housing. I'm here, I'm speaking for myself, because I want to produce affordable housing there. As far as I'm concerned, and until the day I die, or it may be removed from this board, I'm going to push for affordable housing to be there. What that looks like, how many people are going to be there, and what the population is, yet to be determined. I'd like to work with the neighborhood and the community to get some input on that so that we can come up with something that everybody's, if not happy about, then they could at least tolerate. Okay? But if this deed restriction is removed, yeah, affordable housing is going on that lot.
Just to segue in that, and I want you to touch the rest of your questions. There's a whole host of things that the trust can have under its umbrella for the development of property that go beyond just residences for folks. I want those available because something that I would like to see in town is assistance for halfway homes, assisted living for seniors, actual true assisted living, and being able to provide opportunities in that direction as well. There's things that we can explore there that I wanted to have available. Now, if the town doesn't want us to have those available, that's fine. We'll go back and we'll go do this normal process under the restrictions that are there. But there are things that I think the trust should be looking at. I mean, the town has a whole host of homes for children who are from drug-addicted parents that go through, and you don't want to call them orphanages, but they're places for people to go. We can participate in those. Seven Hills, we can participate with them. One of the things that they have a hardest time doing is actually acquiring land and having communities that are willing to participate and bring those things into town. Stuff that really has a substantive impact on the society in which we live. Grafton's a great community, like you said. We have a stellar school system, and we have a very supportive community in place. We got new libraries. The town's willing to come out and spend money to make the town better. We have a great common, et cetera, et cetera. There are things that we should be doing on this trust that are not going to get started and initiated anywhere else. And I think, and from what my role here is and what I want to see done, is not purely to get to SHI. I think we as a community should be able to go out there and say, hey, we should be able to provide some of these features for folks that don't get them anywhere. I don't know if anybody's, a social worker here. We've had a few come through. But there's not a lot of places to do work like that, and there's a lot in this community that already exists that nobody even knows about, and they're at capacity. And the capacity at some of the inner city places for support are, I'm not going to say they're disgusting, but they're compared to what we would envision as what we live and how we live in Grafton, it's a night and day difference. So, like some of the folks that we talked to reference what you were said, it was Shrewsbury Youth and Family, who participate in Shrewsbury and some of Worcester and some of the programs they have. So, I've approached them and said, hey, we have property here. You already work in the Grafton school system for helping on social behavior and things of that nature.
Yeah, both my in-laws are social workers, VP and C.
It's something that we could do there. And, I understand where people are at. If it's a timing thing, we're going to talk about it. But that's the land we have. We tried years ago while I was on this trust to get Hudson, and we were waylaid at a couple different points to get that particular project under our umbrella to work with. So now we have 25 Worcester Street. I don't think it's nefarious. I don't think what we're trying to do. What I want to do is go to the only vehicle by which we can actually remove and do other things and make an argument to that body and say, these are some of the things that we would want to look at on the property that we can't look at now. And say if they would say yes or no. If that means we wait till spring to do it, I am completely fine with that. We'll make that decision here. But we have a lot of talk about density and SHI and stuff like that, and I'm not going to say I don't care. I live in this community. I've seen what 40B has done to some of the farmland and some of the single-family home developments that should have no business being there. But if we're doing that, we should look at the whole thing and what we have to offer everybody. So that's what we're doing. You don't like it, you show up, you say no, that's fine. But we can't argue it here. This is not where we make the decision. You can't tell us we can't go to town meeting and say there's land there. And I know some people here have been to a lot of our town meetings. I've been to all of them for the past, 17 years. And we bring back things all the time. So to say that we can't go back and have a particular group, town body or town appointed position, come back to town meeting and ask for something again, it's happened a lot. And in a lot of ways for good outcomes, or I think were good outcomes, and I'm glad they brought them back. I think that's one of these, because I think there's a ton of stuff we can do at 25 Worcester Street, and it's access to all the good things we have in this community. We can actually provide it to other people, and the restriction that there, I think, limits that capability.
So with that restriction, I would think I might have been out of state when that was passed. How did that restriction get put on? So was the land available and the town said, we will give it to the housing trust with this restriction, or like how did that restriction get put on the?
He's the author of the actual citizens petition. It was a citizen petition. It wasn't an actual act of any particular.
And did it say 55? You said it was, the town was approached and said, we want this land and we're going to do 55 and older houses.
Yeah, so, sorry. What ended up happening was, we had talked about, just to take a step back for a minute, we had talked about 25 Worcester Street way back in 2014 on this trust center. You probably remember there was a super park proposal there back in 2012 that got shot down. And at the time, John Carlson, Pete Adams, I was on the Affordable Housing Trust. We started talking about, well, that this land would be pretty good for affordable housing. So about 2 years ago, Lieutenant Governor Polito came through town proclaiming Governor Baker's initiative to create additional housing in Massachusetts, not just affordable housing, but housing period, calling it a housing crisis. So at that point, I suggested to the crowd that was there at the presser event that I was going to put forward a warrant article deeding 25 Worcester Street to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of creating affordable housing. My line of thinking was twofold. Number one, I do believe there's a need in the community for senior housing. I do. I think there's a particular need in this community. But number two, if I'm being candid with everybody here, and every single time that there is a proposal for affordable housing, not just in Grafton, but anywhere, you get the school-age children question. And this sort of took that issue off the table, right? So when we did the warrant article, what happened was we brought it before town meeting. It was voted on, it was approved, and the warrant article, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't have a photographic memory, said to the town votes to grant or gift 25 Worcester Street, Grafton, Massachusetts, to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of creating affordable housing. Now, it doesn't say to create affordable housing, because Grafton, the Affordable Housing Trust, we're not a developer. That's not our role. So that language was appended to, like, literally affixed to the deed, take it to the Worcester County Registry of Deeds, and recorded there. So the opinion of counsel, and my opinion also as a lawyer, is that it acts as a deed restriction.
There might be some confusion. You skipped the word senior.
Oh, senior. I'm sorry, senior. Jesus Christ. See, I swear to God, you speak extemporaneously. 55 plus senior housing. Thank you very much. This, ladies and gentlemen, I do this for a living, and even I get, it's the challenges of speaking extemporaneously. You know what I mean? Like, it's challenging. So anyway, that's what happened, and now that's as it sits. Council also opines that if we want to request that the town remove or change that deed restriction, we can do that. And again, this is the point of the meeting. I think we're starting to go around in circles. If it's a position of some people on this trust that we need to do a little more research to flesh out whether or not DPH will allow us to count the units as subsidized as 55 and older. If it's the opinion of the trust that it would be cost prohibitive for us to do this without creating too much density, these are issues we have to flesh out. And for the audience, I think the point that I want to drive home is if you're looking for less density at that site, which I think a lot of people are, then the way to go isn't to force us to do 55 plus housing, because I think that is the road toward more density that people don't want. All right, so it's a balancing act, you know.
Well,
Depends
I
what you
think
want.
I think the issue is that, it just, I know we have your assurance that if you take the deed off, it's definitely gonna go to affordable housing, but worse things have happened where it hasn't. And what Brittany was saying, that we're looking for assurances here, and it does feel like you were given the land with this deed restriction, you're now asking for the deed to come off, and it is not, it's not what, it is unexpected, and that is a big red flag.
Sure.
So, and especially because it's at the town meeting where, not the normal town meeting, again, another big red flag. And I think we could take all those flags down by delaying it, having a little bit more, getting a few more assurances. And again, like, thank you for doing all this. Thank you for all of this affordable housing. But make sure that when something is gifted to you, that it is extremely transparent and it is extremely fair.
Fair enough.
I have a couple questions, Ed. Just
Sure.
Sorry, just to understand correctly. When you put the deed restriction on, did you have any insight on the feasibility of it would be strictly senior affordable housing and how that would happen? Like,
No.
would you have a grant? Because I don't think a developer would partner with you because there's going to be no profit for them.
No.
It's a for-profit developer. So just curious if you thought through it all, or
Nope.
okay. So that's kind of why the feasibility of this is a little
Go
bit.
through your thoughts, please.
So that's kind of why you're asking for the deed restriction to be.
Well, I mean, again,
Because it's not, it's gonna be far out the road before that's ever built.
Yeah, so the way that we're doing this is we're trying to figure out, again, in real time, whether or not this is something that could work. If we want, as a trust, to bring not-for-profit developers in to figure out if this is something that they could do, we could do that.
It's just gonna take a long time, right?
Yeah,
So that's
I mean,
the why.
Yeah.
That's the why it's
Yeah.
happening. So I guess the other question that they're asking is how do we ensure them that that's
There's
not
no
the
way.
case? So there's no way.
There's an assurance on there now that it can go a
So
certain way.
we're proposing if we got the deed restriction nixed, or whatever you want to say legally, we would
Removed.
go 40B most likely.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a
then-
friendly 40B. It would be a local initiative
And
project.
then that would secure minimum of 25% affordable housing, so the 75%
If you
would
no,
not
if you
be
had
affordable
if you
housing?
had 25% of the units counted as affordable housing, like definitely by price and
it
by
counts
income,
towards the SHI.
the entire 100% would count toward the SHI.
There's a-
Apartment buildings,
There's
for
a
apartments.
chance.
not for
Not for
sale units.
standalone units. That's correct.
Okay.
What it
I'm
also.
just trying to understand.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
And I think it will help them.
So I understand what was said about how town meeting functions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Having participated in quite a few myself, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg. We could spend 8 months going through a concept and a design
Oh,
of
yeah,
something that
oh,
we
yeah.
want, and then we would go and pitch it at town meeting as a specific project, and which is something we
And then
could
it would
do
have
and
to
we
be
could talk
approved
about.
again.
No, they would remove the restriction, and we would say we would build this. How the language
Okay.
gets articulated at town meeting. I think that's being expressed out there. They want something. Well, what's going to happen if
Right.
we do this?
Yeah. Fair, right? Fair.
It's a fair point, and I understand that. But from our perspective, and opening up opportunities to what we can do there,
You're looking to make more affordable housing quicker for people.
well, our mission is to do that. Our
Yeah.
mission is not to open up commercial activity or do anything like that there. It is to provide affordable housing. That's our charge.
Yep.
And the state's going to require us to do that because the trust, or the inception of the trust, takes it out of the town's hands and puts it in the trust hands, gives the autonomy so you don't have to deal with NIMBYism. It's essentially what it boils down to. So that's why the position is where it is, and that's why it has value when the land comes to us. It is far more valuable in our portfolio than it is in the town, because we remove the restrictions of having to go to a town meeting. So my thought process behind this, and when I argued for it, was to go back and remove the restriction there, and then go explore the different things we wanted to do with it. Now we could. It might not happen, and we might not be able to do, but you don't know until you ask.
But then they have no say.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Yep. Yeah, you don't have.
I'm playing devil's advocate here. You know.
No,
and
I
that's
just,
fine, and we
well,
gotta-
so
yeah.
hold on, because I just phased out for a second there.
Now we're
Yeah.
gonna spend a little time discussing this, so you can put your hand down. We'll get back to it if we have time
Sorry,
at the end. But
Brittany wasn't here for the actual warrant article that was
Guys, can we not just shout out from the audience?
No, we don't need to tell them to shut
Well,
up.
this needs to be in the microphone.
Joanne, if you're gonna engage with the trust, Joanne, you gotta be up here, and like I just stated, we're gonna have some dialogue between us as a trust to get through it. And at the end of that dialogue, if you feel we're missing information, I will allow you to come up and provide it. Do you need it?
Let us talk and then I'll ask you to come up.
She told you. So if you could let us, hash this out a little bit, because I think we're gonna get to a point where we
Yeah.
decide what we're gonna do.
Pardon me, I'm just trying to understand the whole situation here, so.
Yeah, so a citizen's petition is a particularly odd way to do something like this.
Mhm.
Typically, it'd be like the trust would go and say, can we have this land?
Right.
It didn't work out because the trust wasn't actually doing that at the time. So
Trust
an
wasn't doing anything at the
individual went, who understood how to do and how to present, pitched it to the town. And it was pitched in a way that we wanted to get it conveyed. And the thought process was that, well, we get the land and then we'll work with it. So now that we spent some time going over what our potential for
Yeah, you
what
did
we're
your due
allowed to
diligence.
do,
Mhm.
we felt that we needed to broaden our ability to do stuff. And so that's kind of what we got to this point. So in this process, you have the public meetings like we're having now, to solicit for input. And then at town meeting, we would have to make the pitch to the whole body and say, yeah, well, we kind of just want the flexibility. Here's why, here's the roadblocks that we run into. And then the town would actually have an up and down vote on it. And then what it would take is, it would remove that warrant article language from the deed. So it would just be land that's in the trust's portfolio that just solely belongs to us with no restrictions on it.
Yeah, I think everyone understands that.
But the restrictions for the trust are that we are to provide affordable housing there in our capacity.
Percentage.
No.
The
If-
trust itself.
Yes, the trust itself is here to build affordable housing. The deed restriction that currently on there, from the language that was articulated in the article and what was voted up, restricts it.
Mhm.
So that was attached to the deeds. The deed's ours, and then this follows with it. We're asking to take what follows with it to be circumvented by an additional article that we would have now that would take that language out.
Yep, I get that. I got all
Okay.
that.
What was your concern about input?
Sorry, what?
Did you have a concern about input? I heard the word input.
Oh no, I didn't say
Okay.
input. I don't remember
Sorry.
saying input.
So before this drags too long into the night, we've taken a lot of comments and a lot of had a lot to digest, so to speak. I'll take input from trust members on how comfortable they feel presenting this, or if we make a decision, we have to make it tonight on what we're going to do with the article on town meeting floor. Town meeting in October is typically not well attended. It was well attended last year, but that's an anomaly. I would say that only relative to our spring town meeting, but you're talking less than 1% of the populace. But this is how Yankee democracy works. And so typically, they're at the end of the night. I don't know how long it's going to go, but some of those concerns that it's going to be in the wee hours
You're saying I need a babysitter?
are relevant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We've had them go late. They've been run very, very efficiently. Our new town moderator is fantastic. And our last meeting, which was her first, went swimmingly.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it's gonna go swimmingly, but you're gonna get to the point where we'll spend this conversation we had with these folks, we're gonna have again on town meeting floor.
Understood.
So if we feel as a trust that we're unprepared to tackle this particular type of argument, then yeah, we pass it over till the spring. If we feel we just want to go forward with it, but we have to ask. Most of the time, I've only seen one occasion where it hasn't gone through. We petition, but we ask the moderator to pass it over, and then she conducts a vote to pass it over, so the town meeting can say, no, we're going to decide on this tonight. So they have the ability to do that. Very rarely happens, especially if the article presenter is the one doing it. So those are things to consider.
Okay.
I would not back down. I would be open to moving it to the spring. I wanted to pursue Hudson in the spring, which is another difficult thing to broach. It does
Can't
give
do
us
more
a
than
lot
one
of
at a time.
No, you can, but I didn't feel comfortable with the amount of time the
Okay.
trust had. So we asked for just this one to be reserved in its spot. And this one's proving to be a large thing. And you know, attendance is a thing. 30 people show up to it, they swing it one way or the other. And that's how a lot of our town meetings go. And I understand democracy and I understand how we're doing this, but typically in, you know, a lot of these settings, you know, people come in, they vote for a particular thing, they get up and they leave. And those are how these type of issues have been settled in the past. So we will have to deal with that as well, which is fine. So, you know, it's just something to consider. So I'm going to start with Matt. Ideas, opinions on what you think we should do with this particular article.
So, I heard what the community had to say tonight. I'm moved by the commentary. And I would recommend that we pass this over and bring it up in the spring. For the two main reasons that I think we should do that is that this does directly potentially impact the senior community. We would be having town meeting on a Saturday, and it would be more well attended in the spring. And we went with the original article in spring, which is a more well attended meeting. So for those reasons, I think I'd be in favor of just passing this over and moving it to the spring, in favor of us focusing on GSX right now, because we've got a lot of other work to do. So that would be what I'd be in favor of.
Okay. Dan?
I'm kind of on the fence. Well, first of all, we're not guaranteed to have Saturday town meeting in the spring. It's only if the article passes. But yeah, so I'm not really sure at this point. I think it sounded like there were a lot of objections that were specifically about doing it at this town meeting, and I really, really hope that if we were to do it in the spring, the people who were specifically talking about that would support it in the spring. But yeah, I don't.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, that's the kind of the game we got to play here.
Right.
You know, we can't really commit to it. We can't really ask for, you know, individuals to come and support it on some type of weird deal or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Ed?
Well, you know, I'm of two minds about it myself. I'm the original author of the warrant article to get it to be senior affordable housing. Like I said, I don't know how many times here tonight, I really do believe there is a need for it here in the community. One of my issues with the warrant article always has been, I'm getting information from on high that DHCD is not going to allow us to count these towards subsidized housing units, and we're just sort of surrendering and falling on our sword on that, which I have an issue with. We're also sort of hearing secondhand, without having a developer at our meetings to pitch to, that this wouldn't be really feasible without it being really dense. I feel like as an attorney, I don't know those things. I have no reason to believe that they're not true, but I really think that at this point, part of my due diligence, and especially to go to a town and maintain credibility here, would be to want to know, yes, for sure, we talked to DHCD, we talked to developers, this is what the density would look like, this is what the impact would be before we made the move. On the other hand, if I'm calling a spade, there are people who are arguing against this warrant article who argued against it being put into senior affordable housing last spring, you know, or voted against it. You know, so all of a sudden everybody's championing senior affordable housing. Welcome to the cause. So I don't mind putting it off until the spring, but we have, and I always think of these things in meeting terms, we do this once a month. That means we've got October, November, December, January, before you've got to start thinking about spring town meeting and putting something on the warrant. That's like 4 meetings, and if we do it twice a month, it's 8. That's a lot of work to do.
October, so
right.
It's 3 meetings.
Yeah, basically. So we're to say we're putting it over and focusing on GSX. We're doing both things at the same time. You know, we're efforting 2 things at the same time. That's what's challenging about even thinking about taking another property like Millbury Street in the spring. Now you're juggling 3. So, you know, I want to move with some alacrity on 25 Worcester Street because fundamentally I do feel like there's a need. And again, I've been doing this a long time. And since 2007, the Affordable Housing Trust has not developed one single unit of affordable housing. And I always resist, I always resist slowing things down, which is the very reason I brought the warrant article in the first place, because nobody was doing anything at all, So if it's smarter, I prefer smarter as opposed to aggressive. So that's fine.
No, thanks for your patience and me learning on the background of this. I would agree with Matt that it seems like, and Ed, that there's not a lot of due diligence done on this quite yet to understand why the constraint needs to be gone. I think I do understand why, because it's going to take a little bit of time to get that grant funding or a nonprofit developer to help us out with that. It seems like, but to me, coming into this new, it seems like a little bit more has to be done to put some people's minds at ease, and maybe then get some more backing and support. I think it also is not super clear. I'm an architect, very visual. Charts and graphs and all that stuff makes it a lot easier. Diagrams, they drill it into your head in school, makes it a lot easier for everyone to understand things. So I'm happy to take that on and make those pieces so that maybe we can get a little bit more support and figure out exactly what we want to do with this piece of property.
Before we leave, I think you're the first new face that I've kind of seen on this that has not been somebody that's not kind of institutionalized is not a good word, but we're all knee deep in all this stuff in this community and have been for a very,
you guys
very
like a lot of
long time.
words. Yeah.
And so fresh perspective is incredibly rejuvenating.
Yeah.
So the fact that we had 5 people for a committee, any committee in town, is kind of a blessing. So, and we're going to get one new member like Sean had said. So I'm of two minds of this. I know how town meeting works. I've been to enough of them, and I've seen projects that were handled by individuals. I've seen projects that were been handled by groups of individuals, inter-party to town. I'm not really one that wants to get into a swamp, trade a town meeting floor, because there's nothing that you're going to give us that's going to guarantee an outcome. There's nothing that we're going to give you that's going to guarantee an outcome. We can have some reasonable expectation of an outcome, but I've seen enough of these go in the way they've gone to know that if we have something that we want to do there and we get specific on a target, there's probably not a person in here that's going to be, show up for us. We go, we get our voters, and we show up to town meeting and we make a pitch to try to get more voters, but we bring our voters to get it done. And that's how business has been done in this town for a very, very long time. And say what you want about it, it's fine, it may be bad, it may be good, I don't know. But it is the system that we have in place, and it's how a lot of these things have gone through, whether it's a high school, library, or whatnot. So those are the things, and that's the sandbox that we're playing with as a trust. Our particular role and our mission is to build affordable housing. If that means going to town meeting and pitching for a site to get something added to our portfolio so we have greater flexibility to accomplish our mission, that's what we need to do. So at a certain point, we have to make a decision as a body that this is what we want to do, and then we'll figure out how to get there and we go do it. Soliciting for public input and things like that is something that of course we should be doing, and we're doing it this evening. But we can't just punt this down the road and then not have something that we want to build there. So if we're punting this because we want to do it, I want to know from the trust what we actually want to do. So are there specific things that we want to get accomplished there? Like from my perspective, I think a group home would work very, very well there. So is that something we want to go path down? We want something for, people to get out of troubled homes to have a community to live in as a halfway house type of thing. It's a bad word for it, I know, but those type of things. So, we can't just kind of just like say, okay, we'll pass it over, but we have no real goals in mind. I don't think we need to discuss it tonight because I think, we're going to just pass it over.
Yeah, do you guys typically discuss that stuff at these types of meetings? Is there
Everything
always,
has to be
is
discussed
there
at
always
these
a listening
meetings.
session afterwards too?
No.
Okay, so it's a little bit easier to get things accomplished.
Yeah, so we
Well,
had, the planning
maybe.
the planning department had scheduled a different listening session, which was more of a general listening session
Yeah.
on their own.
Okay.
That logistically just didn't work out, so we added that to our meeting, which is why you have this
Yeah.
community here, so.
I appreciate you just making the move because I'm all about doing. I don't like to spin circles.
Well, no,
so
I mean,
appreciate
what
that.
what you just, what you said a moment ago just struck me as funny because yeah, the meetings aren't normally like this, but I wouldn't say that we get more accomplished. Like, again, we haven't
Well,
built anything, ever.
You come with an agenda that's 3 items, so I mean,
Well, this
I
is
guess-
specific to tonight.
Yeah.
So they're typically more. Now, some of the
are
problems.
they more specific too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
Gotcha.
ask everybody the week before what they want on there.
Gotcha.
But you know, a lot of these things, like for GSX, there's things that we got to kind of piece together, but we're waiting on other parties. The other thing that we've had is an extreme amount of turnover on the board. So if you look at just not the spring, but in June, well, I guess it's the spring, we were flipping 4 members. So it's hard for me to go to GSX and have an actual discussion with the developer and then say, oh yeah, but I've got all of my quorum changing over, so I have no idea what they're going to do or say or what their opinions are, and then to try to negotiate a deal for them to get the 25%. So it's been kind of fluid over the past few months. This is like these last 2 meetings are the first ones that we've had where we've had a group of people that are going to be here for 2 years. And it's very important because the lifeline of these is going to go, I only have a year left. So if I get off next year, all the work that I've done, which has been considerable over the past, 6 months, well beyond what I kind of signed on for, so to speak, is, that's got to go to somebody else. So we got to make sure we're building that too. Because if we have a grant program for $1 million, we need everybody to make sure they're showing up to meetings. It's a regular face, and we actually are providing that transparency and that continuity of service, so to speak. So I guess it's late now, so we'll take a vote to pass this over, I guess. Give me a motion.
I'll make a motion. We asked the moderator at fall town meeting to pass over this article.
I hear a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Oh, we've had like 4.5 hours of discussion. Okay.
Never mind.
Without any further discussion, I'll roll call because we're hybrid anyways, but Brittany?
Just any comments that I have left?
Yes or no?
Oh,
We're
yeah?
past that now, we're to a vote.
Yes to him, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Kusher?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Bruce is aye, so we're going to, at town meeting, I will provide a motion to the moderator before it starts. I'll probably get it to her tomorrow and say this is what we're planning on doing, and she will probably recognize it. At our next meeting, which will be, of course, the normal one on the 14th, unless we have something come up with GSX that we need to meet sooner, I want some participation on all the trust members' behalfs on what this looks like if we're approaching the town meeting and the town body differently, what they want to see there. So the new ideas, the new concepts, taking what we have, we're not going to just let this sit and wait until February. There's a certain amount of momentum that I think we need to carry. So if we've been convinced tonight that we need something a little bit more tangible for people to look at, and that's the direction we want to go, we need to get that together. And it's not all going to come from me. So I'm going to need that input. So we'll get that on the next meeting, and then anything else that comes up. I appreciate everybody coming out. We obviously appreciate the comments. Did anybody else have anything before we conclude the meeting? We're not gonna retort, but we'll take it down and get it to at the next meeting. It's 10:30, and no good decisions get made in one of these meetings after 10 o'clock. So we're kind of done. And my back was spent about 2 hours ago. Joanne, if you could come up.
I just wanted to thank you for your time. I know you're all volunteers. You do this just for the love of our town. We love our town too. We want to support something that's going to work for our town, for all of the town. And I think it's very important to do some more work, even though you have done an enormous amount already, you've said. I would just like to see some more clarity, something that we won't get our backs up against, which is what happened. And I think you have to acknowledge that you were given something for a certain cause, and then you just came at us and said you were changing it. There was a lot of misunderstanding. We didn't know why. We didn't understand how you would have brought something and then suddenly wanted to change it. We have a little bit more knowledge now. So thank you for all the work you will do to get 25 Worcester Street to an affordable project.
Joanne, I will recommend that some of the folks here tonight, this is their first time participating in our particular dialogues. You said that we do a lot of work. You think we do. We do a tremendous amount of work, and if you're looking at tonight, we're here tonight. We also have our town planner here with us. There's a lot of effort that goes into these meetings. There's a lot of effort that works outside of this meeting on an individual basis and a subcommittee basis with developers, projects that are in town, understanding where we're at, housing production plan, and getting these things aligned. It is a bulk work of work, and we do it gladly, of course, but we do.
We do appreciate it, and we are here to support you through your planning for something that, as I said, will work with clear understanding for all of us. So thank you very much.
We started recording our meetings when I got back on the trust, so there is a good deal, if this is your first time coming to it, to kind of understand the thought process by which we took to get to our position and what we were looking at in the past. And I know Brittany, you'll look at it too. But if you come to our next meeting, which of course we hope you do, there is some good homework and catch up there for how we're basing our decisions and how we got here. So it's not as last minute as being interpreted now, but I get this is how it works, so it's fine. I'll recommend that we adjourn, but I need it by a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call. Roll call. Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Bruce is an aye. Dan?
Aye.
Opt and I.
Brittany is an aye. We are out.